Man. And yeah, so just to be clear on format here, I want everyone to feel free to use the chat, use the Q&A. If you want to interrupt me because you're like, what you just said made absolutely no sense, by all means, you know, I want this kind of classroom dynamic, not just me talking at you for 2 hours. Cool, I see some people are already opening Unreal Engine. That's great. Yeah, as everyone's starting to do, certainly go right ahead and open up Epic Games Launcher. I'll do a very short slideshow. And yeah, okay, I see whoever's sharing the screen right now, I can see what they're doing. Let's go ahead and make me, great, I think we see my screen now, and me, hi. Great, okay, yeah, so right off the bat, everyone, it's gonna take a couple minutes to load depending on how new your computer is, so go ahead and launch UE5, yeah, 4.25. Also, I just want to make sure everyone has the starter content installed. It is like 700 megabytes. It should install 800 megabytes. It should install automatically, but I do want to make sure everyone has that as we will be using it. Not the end of the world if you don't have it. There's always other options, but let's just make sure starter content's there. But right off the bat, let's go ahead and launch UE4, Epic Games Library, UE 4.25. And then we're going to be starting with the third person template. Oh, hey, there's a bunch of stuff happening in the chat. Hey guys, anyone sending chats to me privately, I am not going to be able to see most of those during this. So for the most part, try to send those towards Steve. Steve, do you want to, I don't know, make your name more prominent, like Steve Copilot or something like that? Steve is the one with a bunch of planes flying around him, so that makes it easier to see. I've got a couple more people waiting to get in. Okay, so once you get to this screen, whoops, it's down here for me, this screen, we are going to just go to games right here, okay? And you'll hit next. And we're gonna start with the, where is it? third person right there. And just a fun fact, later in the course, I know quite a few of you have VR and work in VR as well. So we'll also be adding toward the end the VR template as well. But we're starting with just the third person one. And you'll go ahead and hit next. And you can leave all this stuff by default. If you're worried at all about the specs of your computer and how well it's going to handle what we're doing today, then feel free to change some of these settings like scalable. And we do want starter content. Leave it on desktop because that might interfere with some of the stuff that I'll be doing, but mobile, of course, would also be lower intensity. And then certainly start off with ray tracing disabled. Even if you have an RTX graphics card or something like that, it's going to add a lot of overhead to everything you're doing. So no need for ray tracing today. Make sure you have a folder where you want to save your project. And I'm going to go ahead and call this project Platform Platformer. Create it, okay? Give that a little bit to load up. And while that's loading up, I'm just gonna do a quick run through of what we will be talking about today. So let me pull up a little PowerPoint I just made 5 seconds ago. All right, everyone sees that? Great, okay, so who am I? That's some stuff about me. I trained in architecture, run a company in New York City now, build a bunch of stuff for architecture as well as live events. That's all cool. A lot of you guys know me on Twitter. Blueprints, you know what? I want to get this class dynamic going. Who has some idea of what blueprints are, but isn't 100% sure because they're not an Unreal Engine expert? But I'm curious to hear someone who's coming to this kind of new, just what do you think a blueprint is? Someone who's really daring. Go ahead and speak. I see John Oakes just unmuted himself.
Oh God, you're really watching. Flowcharts, but with intelligence.
Ooh, I like that answer. Anyone else?
Some kind of like node-based way of doing things versus writing code. Similar to shader networks in Maya.
Visual programming.
Mm-hmm. That's all good.
I love visual programming. I tried Touch Designer before and in a bit Houdini.
I like all that.
I'm gonna go with node-based programming.
Yeah, everything everyone is saying is absolutely correct. I'm also a little bit thrown off all of a sudden because suddenly there's more people in the waiting room. Let me just admit them. Doopa-doopa-doo. We are up at 92 participants. Okay, and yeah, I would agree with what everyone says. This is the way that Unreal Engine codes, but also it can be a little bit confusing because this is also the term for when you are, to use a Unity term, making prefabs. Like if you're combining stuff together and then you have kind of these standalone groups that can be replicated, those are also blueprints, even if you don't add any extra code into them. So I want to make sure as I'm discussing what we're doing when we're creating blueprints, that those are also called blueprints. Blueprints is all the coding that goes on, that is visual scripting and node-based, and then it is also sometimes when you're just like grabbing some objects, combining them, and then you want to spawn a bunch of them. So the topics we'll be going over today is we're going to create a new project with a third-person template. Hopefully everyone is compiling shaders right now, and that is happening. We are going to build a platform, literally a platform blueprint, a blueprint of a platform, and that platform is going to replicate itself first in a straight line, and then we're going to get it to randomly decide whether to keep going straight or turn left or turn right or kind of skip a spot and add a jump point. We're then going to replicate it only for when a player is walking through it. And then we're going to make some crazy stuff happen to the platforms as you're passing over them, just to add a little bit of danger. And then we're going to set an endpoint, put a little prize there so you know you won the game. And then we are going to track how long it takes you to get there, again, to add a little competitive element. And then at the end, we'll do a little bit of VR stuff. And maybe if we have a little time, we'll do some other crazy things with flashing lights, some rotation of platforms, give your player some health. Someone want to say something? I hear some noises. And the way that I ended up putting together this particular course for today was really just thinking about all the things that I wished that I knew more about with blueprints when I was first getting started. Some of the lessons I'll be going over today are things that I just learned, like, 2 weeks ago, let's say. And some of this stuff I learned very early on in my Unreal Engine journey. But I wanted to try to think of a way to combine everything into one project where along the way we're naturally going to be going through a lot of useful aspects of creating blueprints. And yeah, and then just to show you guys what this ultimately is going to look like, I posted this to Twitter last night, but here's just kind of where I ended up. So we have a platform. It's going to replicate. Each new platform will have some little quirk to it as you go. Kind of make your way through it. See a little counter above the player. Keep going, keep going. And then you'll notice in the upper left, we're printing a few things to the screen. And right now we're counting how many platforms we have. And I think here it's set up so after 24 platforms, it decides that that's the end of the game. So then get some fun music. And there you go. You won the game. Hooray. And so we'll take that step by step. So if everyone has Unreal Engine open now, make sure everyone can see mine. Should open up to something like this. Everyone okay so far? Everyone who's got Unreal going up to this point? You can take a 1 second pause to see if there's any emergencies in the chat. Although I'm sure Steve is holding it down.
I am doing my best.
Actually, that's interesting. When I'm sharing, it's much harder to see the chat. Here we go. Chat. Camera keeps floating away. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Switching between two windows is no bueno. Yeah, using two computers. Sorry, David. Yeah, so and for anyone who is trying to follow along and might be having some trouble here, I'm gonna try to do this as much as possible in a way where even if you're just listening to my voice, hopefully you'll still know what to do. But if you, yeah, Alt-Tab is a great shortcut for swapping between two windows quickly. And then if you do by any chance have a second monitor or a second computer, or even like an iPad, or you probably don't want to use a phone, but you could have this Zoom stream going on a separate device and then have your Unreal Engine focused computer very clean. There you go. And there's another tip from CD Henry. Use split screen. Hit Windows and left key while in one frame. All right. Okay, guys. All right, great questions. Keep it up. And Steve's doing his best down there. Thanks, Steve. By the way, it's Steve's birthday today. Everyone, when you have a moment, wish Steve a happy birthday. It's very nice of him to be doing this today for me.
Happy birthday, Steve.
Thank you. No, don't type it, because then it's just going to be a lot of spam in the channel. But thank you.
Birthday.
I appreciate
it.
Thanks, everybody.
I love it.
Thank you.
Okay, so with our little third person here, some of you might have already done this, but feel free to go ahead and hit play, and you'll just see kind of how this works right off the bat. If you plugged in a game controller into your computer before starting Unreal Engine, you can also use a game controller. Right now I'm just using my mouse and my WASD keys to kind of move around. You go up the stairs, spacebar makes you jump. The jump is pretty intense. I'll also go over at some point how to modify that if you want, but it's pretty straightforward. When you press escape, you'll go out of that. So looking real quickly at UE4 for anyone who just isn't super familiar with this, the most important thing is how to navigate around in the editor. And the way you do that is you take your mouse button, you hold down the right button, and then you can move your mouse, and that gets you to look around. If you want to move around the editor, while you're holding down that mouse button, you can keep your mouse still and then use WASD as well as Q and E to fly around. Q and E are up and down, WASD are front, forward, left, right. If you want to change your camera speed, that can be done a couple ways. Up here, camera speed. You can also do it by scrolling your mouse wheel while you are flying in or out. Mouse wheel down slows you down, mouse wheel up will speed you up. If you see something far away and you want to get closer to it, if you select it by clicking on it and press F, F stands for frame or focus, and that's going to zoom you into it super fast. And then, yeah, those are kind of the major ones. Over here, by the way, we have our basic, let's say, components of Unreal Engine, although, yeah, actors is the term in Unreal Engine for basically all the objects. Anything you put into a scene, including blueprints, those are often referred to as actors. Over here on the right, we have the world outliner that shows everything that is in the scene right now. You'll notice little different icons for things like light. Anything with a little house is a static mesh actor. And then down, you'll notice as I click on different things down here in the details panel, we're seeing more information about each thing. We have our transform, which is location, rotation, and scale. We have whether it's going to move or not, static, movable. We have where the static mesh is coming from. We have materials, and then some other options that we'll get to as needed. And then down here, of course, is our content browser. You'll see everything here is what comes with the third-person template. Good so far? Okay, great. Let me pull up this guy here. Oh, and one other thing, if anyone is a little bit worried about how their computer's performing while this is all going on, over here in settings, I want you to change the engine scalability settings. So by default, they might be at epic or cinematic. If you change them to low or medium, that will help with your computer's performance. But you will notice that you'll get compiling shaders, which does also take some processing power, usually from your CPU, to kind of get Unreal Engine back to running smoothly. You'll notice that my materials just went away because it is recompiling all those shaders that will show what my materials look like because I changed it to a lower setting.
Hey, thanks for that tip. Can you repeat that tip again?
Sure, no problem. Yep, so up in settings, if you go settings and then under scalability, there's engine scalability settings. And everything might be at epic or cinematic by default. but instead you can change it to low. You can also change any of these on their own. You could change your resolution, scale, or anti-aliasing effects. And this can help with performance on lower end computers. And you'll notice as my shaders are compiling, everything is starting to come back. And that's all good. Okay, so just to get started with thinking about blueprints, I want you guys to see what a fairly fleshed out blueprint looks like. And a great example of that is in the third person character that comes with this. So if you go ahead and click on the third person character, you'll notice it gets highlighted in yellowish orange. And then if we go over to the world outliner, anything that's a blueprint will actually have a little thing here under the type category, a little blue bit of text that tells you you can edit it. And that is the sign that something's a blueprint. I just accidentally clicked on the SkySphere blueprint. So let me get out of that. What I meant to click on was the third person character. So if I click on edit third person character, that's gonna come up. And now, congratulations, we're in blueprints. And the way you navigate around blueprints is like a lot of 2D programs. You'll use the left mouse to pan around when you click and drag, and then you can use your mouse wheel to scroll in, scroll out. And then of course you can select things. And as people have already said, this is of course node-based. You'll notice everything has these nice bits of spaghetti connecting them. And what we have here are different kinds of events and functions and variables, often coded by color. So at a certain point in your blueprint journey, you'll get to the point where even from a distance, you'll have some idea of what's going on in a blueprint just based on colors. For example, the red, these are all events. Here what we're seeing, and you'll notice these comment boxes around it, which also can help with explaining what something's doing. This is about turning and looking and how that is happening. You'll notice some math here. There's a lot of math that tends to happen inside blueprints. And then if you see that little F up there, that means that it's a function. And of course, functions are useful for anything that you're going to be repeating multiple times, but it can also just be a way to condense some of your code so it's not all laid out in front of here. If you double click on something that's a function, it will, oh, in this case, actually, it's a C++ function. Sorry, I thought it would open something else in blueprints. We don't want to deal with C++ right now. Let's see if any of these are functions. You can actually see functions down here. This actually does not have any functions. We just have our construction script. But here in the event graph, you can see all the things that are happening here. Everything that's red is one of these events under the event graph. And down here, you're also seeing variables, and these are also color-coded and shape-coded. We'll get more to that in a little bit. We will go over variables. And then, of course, any other actors that are part of the blueprint are here. So you'll see the third-person character is made up of a capsule, which is used for collision and whether or not you're moving through something, figuring out if that's being triggered. And also, we can see all this, by the way, over in the viewport. By default, you're in the event graph, which is a tab over here. And if you go over to viewport, you can actually see the character acting very similarly to how he is in the Unreal Engine editor. And the same controls as the editor apply here, WASD to move around. Yes, we can see the camera. The camera is attached to a boom. So the camera, of course, always trails behind the character. And you also see the mesh.
Alex, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yeah, sorry.
Can you go back to the blueprint section? A couple of folks got, they're a little behind because they're still compiling shaders. Sure. And there's been a request to maybe elaborate a little bit more on what an event is.
Yeah, sure. So an event is any kind of action that you need to have happen inside blueprints. Blueprints are great anytime you need to make something happen, if you need to change something, if you need to spawn something, if you need to calculate something. And so events tend to be things like, here we have turn rate, lookup rate, turning, looking up again, jumping. So jumping, moving, looking around. That's basically what you have going on here for the third person controller. Here you also have moving forward and moving right. And so basically you're saying anytime this event or action is called, do the things that are connected to this. Everything in blueprints happens in sequence. These white lines are telling you that it's going from one event to another. You basically follow the arrows, or rather, I guess, from one node to another, since this is not an event. And you can't actually put multiple things happening at once. So you can't actually have two things happening off the same event. Everything needs to happen in a sequential fashion. So it's, you know, this happens, then this happens, then this happens. So there's actually no, yeah, there's one example of that down here, where if these were turned on, that's interesting, these are turned off by default. You could have this kind of situation where it goes from if touch input is pressed, then it checks to see if a condition is true or false, also known as an if-then statement. And then if it's true, then you're going to use that jump action. Also, the way these are set up, you might be wondering how these get triggered. So these can be triggered by keys. So I could type in, for example, the enter key. And the way I did that, by the way, is just right-clicking in here. And that is the easiest way to get your actions for a blueprint, is literally by typing them in. And you'll notice there's a checkbox that says context sensitive. We'll get more to that later, but that will help narrow your options down for what's actually possible depending on what you're trying to do. But yeah, so here, this is a keyboard press for enter. Well, you notice, like, what is input axis turn? What is input axis lookup? These are actually defined somewhere else. So if I minimize or make smaller my third-person character blueprint for a second, if I go to edit and then project settings, and then find what's called input down under engine, so project settings, scroll, input, here you'll see there's drop downs for axis mappings and action mappings. So action mappings are basically like you're pressing a button and a thing is happening. So here we have jump and reset VR, which both exist in here. Reset VR is in the upper right. And then jump is down here. So basically we're saying if anyone presses the buttons that are defined here, and you'll notice there's VR buttons and gamepad buttons and keyboard buttons, if anyone does any of those, it's going to trigger those actions, those events. Then down below, these axis mappings, these are usually things like moving around, looking around, where you're going to be holding like a joystick in a particular direction, and it's going to be changing as you go. Okay, so that might be a little bit intimidating to see all of that right off the bat, but I just want to give everyone a little bit of a sense of what this looks like. We're about to make our first blueprint together, and it's going to be much simpler than this. But just a couple more things about this as we're looking at it. When you have everything inside a comment box, you can move them all around together instead of individually. So there's kind of a parent-child relationship there. And whenever you change something in a blueprint, up here, these gears under toolbar that says compile, you'll have a question mark there, and the blueprint will not work until it's compiled. So when I hit that now, it's going to give me a green checkbox, and it says it's compiled. Also just occurred to me that I changed how this works. I mean, we're not using anything touch-based, but I'm just changing it back to how it was. I'm going to hit compile again. Okay.
Alex, can I ask one question? I'm sorry.
Sure.
So that part you were just on had me very intrigued, and I can't see how you got to it, where it showed like the jump, and then you got to check different properties and stuff. Does that translate directly to Blueprint visual scripting? Like, in other words, if I was in that other window you were in, where you had the big thing that said jump, and then it said, all those things. Can you show us how to get to that again?
Yes, and you know what? We're just about to build our first blueprint, and I'll make that a part of it to make it extra clear. So let's go to project settings, edit, and then project settings. So we'll give everyone a second to find the input project settings again. So again, that's edit, project settings, and then you'll scroll down until you get to input. And once we're here, we're going to create a really simple blueprint that is just going to toggle a light on and off. Really, really simple just to get started. And so we can do that with an action mapping. So if anyone wants to do it this way, you don't have to, by the way. I'll give a simpler way once we're building it. But if anyone is here right now, go ahead and hit that plus for action mapping. And we can just say toggle light. Okay? And then you can assign that to anything with the game, a gamepad, and you can look up on the Unreal Engine website. Or Steve, if you get a moment, maybe, or you know what, I'll do it because I have a second and Steve's answering questions. I'm going to post a link to where Unreal Engine shows you what all these different terms for input actually mean, because some of them are more obvious than others. But yeah, to start, we'll say, my toggle light is going to be the enter key. I'll leave that up for a moment.
I had a question. Is it possible, like, how would I do both a key and like a gamepad?
You would hit another plus there, and then
Oh,
you can
gotcha.
have your key, and then you can do something with the gamepad. So I don't have a gamepad plugged in right now, but I could say, you know, D-pad up.
And if I could interject access for 1 second, the beautiful
Sure.
thing about Unreal's input system is that gamepad D up, you'll notice, is agnostic. It's not saying Xbox. It's not saying PlayStation. It's not saying Switch. What will happen is no matter what controller is being used for that, it knows what you want with gamepad D up. The same thing applies also for VR controllers. It'll just say right motion controller trigger, and that trigger will work on an Index, a Vive, an Oculus Rift, an Oculus Touch, a Quest, a Focus. If the motion controller is a motion controller and it has a trigger, that will work.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Steve. Yes,
Thank
that's
you. Yeah.
absolutely right. All right, here's one diagram that helps with some input mappings. Chat. And then this goes over this a little bit as well, too. But, you know, for now, I'd say to be safe, yeah, go ahead and try to stick with keyboard controls. That'll just make sure that everything's working properly. All right, you guys think we're ready to create this here first blueprint print?
Yes. Let's do it.
All right, so once you have an action mapping there, I'm gonna exit out of there. You don't have to hit save or anything, that happens automatically. And just to show you the quickest, dirtiest, simplest way to create a blueprint, and I'll explain why this isn't my preferred option in a moment, we're actually gonna go to blueprints up here. It's a big old icon, and we're gonna open the level blueprint. So the level blueprint exists for every single map, every level that you make, and it's just hanging out ready for you to put stuff right there. You don't have to name it or create anything, which makes it pretty simple. And it's useful, of course, for making something happen to something that's already in the scene. So there's a directional light in here right now. You'll notice that if we hit the little eyeball over here in the world outliner, that turns it on and off. So we can do that same thing with a blueprint. And the easiest way to do that is with the level blueprint opened, which again, just for anyone who missed it, blueprints, open level blueprint. Hang out there for a second. Great. Then over here, we can drag our light source directly into our event graph. So now you'll see that light source now is being referenced in here. Okay, so what are we going to do to it? Well, we're going to start real simple by just making some way to turn it on and off. So if you remember, we just created an action mapping called toggle light. So if I right click and I type toggle light, that is now an action event. See, it's red, just like the other ones. And you'll notice you have arrows that come off of pressed and released. And so you can say something happens when you press any of the mappings, the input mappings that are set up for toggle light, or when you let go of the key. But also, if anyone did not get a chance to create an input action, another simple thing you can do here is just type in any kind of input. So I could say, for example, the tab key. That could also be a way that it would work. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to drag off the little blue circle coming off the light source, and you'll notice it says place a new node. And when I let go, it's going to give me context-sensitive options. You'll notice these can all be dropped down. So you're still getting a ton of options here. So it is good to type in what you want. And in this case, I'm going to be toggling the visibility of the light component. So just by typing in the word toggle, that's actually the only option that even came up for me.
Excuse me, Alex, if I could ask a question. Josh Newman speaking. Is there an advantage to using an input action instead of having a key press input?
Great question. So what I'm trying to show you guys today is a fairly modular way of working. Ironically, working in the level blueprint is not very modular, and we'll get to that in a minute. But by using action mappings or the input mapping setup, then it becomes very easy to change things in one spot later rather than having to do it in each of your blueprints. So if you have 30 blueprints and they all have different mappings to keyboards and gamepads and all sorts of things like that, and you need to change those, you have to go through all 30 of those blueprints and manually do it. But if everything is set up as input actions, then in that input menu, you have one place where you can change all of those.
Right. Good. Understood. Nice answer. Thanks.
Great. I see Luigi or Volv is asking how to add a light. You can add a light, but I'm actually just using a light that already exists here in the third-person blueprint. If this is that folder might be closed, you could open it up and find light source directional light. But then you can also create a light just by grabbing here, for example. You could do a point light and just drag it into the scene. Either of those would be fine to bring in here. And so again, as I was dragging out from light source, we're doing toggle visibility. And when I click that, you'll notice it actually did a few things automatically for me. It basically created a bit of a converter to make sure that everything is being set up correctly for the target. But nothing's going to work until we actually have that nice white line saying when someone chooses the input action toggle light, that's what it should do. And toggle visibility is actually going to just swap back and forth on, off, with the light component being on and off. Propagate to children is if there are any child actors, anything that is attached under this light, should that be toggled on and off too? Just to show an example of that, don't worry about this. This is just to elaborate, but I'm doing the light source here. If I had something under that, like actually I could use the point light I just created. So if I made that a child of it, literally done by just dragging it on top of it, the point light is now a child. Now this will work with both of those because it's propagating this event, this action to its children. But you'll also notice that I've only connected right now the input action, but I haven't connected tab. So right now tab would not work, but I can do this. And then both of these are going to toggle visibility. So again, sorry, I made that really tiny. So again, you can have two different events make the same thing happen, but you can't do it the other way around. I can't say, let's just throw in another thing here real quick as an example. I can't have input action toggle light, toggle visibility, and do branch at the same time. You'll notice that by doing that, it disconnected. So if I had something else, doesn't matter what, that I wanted to have happen when I do input action toggle light, I have a couple different ways I could do that. I could have it happen after toggle visibility happens, or you can also set up what's usually called flow control. So if I type in sequence, for example, I could do that. And sorry, by the way, this is a really useful feature. I want to make sure I don't rush through too quick. If you're dragging out from a node, a little pin there, like this one that says pressed, and then you select a new one, it's automatically going to put it in between the one you just dragged from and the one it's going to. So instead of having to, let me undo that and show basically what happened because it's a useful feature. So if I just clicked somewhere else and typed sequence and it appeared there, if I wanted to put that here, I'd have to connect it here and here. But because I did it dragging out from that first pin from here, it's going to automatically put it in between, which is pretty useful. But as I was saying, so if you want several things to happen when the input action toggle light occurs, then you can either just have it all in a line, or if you want to break it down into more of a first this, then this kind of thing, then you can do it this way. You can have first the 0, then 1. Sorry?
Well, I get simultaneous.
So you can't. That's the whole idea. You cannot do things.
Oh shit! I didn't know I was unmuted.
Well, it's a good thing to bring up. I mean, yeah, I think people were initially going into Unreal Engine. A lot of times in a program like Unity, it can seem like everything can be happening at the same time, even though even the C# aspect of Unity, in most cases, you are having things happen in a sequential fashion like this. The visual element of how Blueprint works just makes it very clear that things are not happening simultaneously.
But Alex, when you've got a component like this toggle visibility function, the input is passed to that output essentially instantaneously, right? I mean, the toggle visibility is going to happen within one frame, and whatever that output is going to be sent to the next thing within the same frame, right? It's not like you're not waiting for something to complete.
That's correct, yes. It will appear instantaneous, but it's just important to note that the order of operations is important. So if you say you're turning something off and then, or let's say you're destroying something, and then you're trying to do something to it after it's destroyed, it doesn't matter that it's all happening in the same frame. It matters that first it was destroyed and then you're trying to do something to it and it doesn't exist anymore, versus if you do something to it and then destroy it, it's fine, even though, again, it's all happening in a fraction of a second.
Right. Can I just add one thing real quick, Alex? Because I deal with this in like AAA level development for Unreal.
Yes, please do.
That you're correct that this is happening. I like to call it subtick, because in one tick, which depending on your CPU, it could be even 11 milliseconds, you can get over 1,000 operations happening within under that one tick. So, and it's even more than that. Like you'll wind up seeing, if you do the for each loop tutorial on Unreal, they show you how to break it and how to get you CPU bound. And I think they got up to 10,000 for each loop operations before they dropped a frame. So you can fit a lot of stuff in subtick. Don't get too obsessed over, well, I need this both to happen at the same time. If you have 5 things happening, it's all going to happen before you'll even notice it. Right?
Yes.
It's happening subtick. It's happening super, super fast.
Yeah, thank you. And a few things that popped up in the chat that are worth mentioning. Flip-flop is a really good alternative to a sequence of 2 exits. It's essentially a toggle as well. So if you type flip-flop here, this toggle visibility basically is a flip-flop. So, you know, I'll just do this as a separate thing. So when this is happening, you could actually say the visibility is going to set visibility. So you could flip-flop between setting the visibility on and then setting the visibility off. So this is also kind of a toggle, but there are a few things that just have this built into one action, one function, like toggling visibility. So that's pretty useful. And then again, you still have that propagate to children option. So the way this would work again is every time you run this, it's going to go A, then B, then A, then B. And in fact, one thing that's wonderful about Blueprint that you don't get in something like C# is, yes, David asked, can you watch Blueprint logic in action while running the game? That's exactly what I was about to show. So if we go up here right now and we do simulate, or play would work as well, you can see what is going to be happening. So I'm going to hit play, but it says I have an error, unresolved compiler error. So we should go investigate that really quick. Not sure what that's about. Third person example map.
Oh,
so that's over in my level blueprint.
You don't have something connected to the target on your second.
Oh yeah, that's it. Thank you. Yep, it's just that. Okay, great. So compile. You always have to compile. You can also, if you want to make sure you're saving a lot, you can say save on compile always, which can also make it so, you know, if Unreal crashes, all your other things are still saved as well. Save often. That's a good piece of advice. So let's watch what happens when I press play. So nothing at first. You'll notice we have this big old border around. It says we're simulating. But if I hit, sorry, I need to be in the game window actually. You can't just simulate these input actions from in here. You need to actually be in here to make it happen. Oh, and you know what? I'm sorry. Simulate won't work for these because these actions are only going to happen while you're playing. So let's hit play. I went down to show you something new when it wasn't even necessary. We just want to hit play. So here I am inside the window. And if I press tab, ooh, something weird's happening there. So you'll notice that it's working, but we're not seeing it happen inside the event graph here. I'm not actually sure why that's occurring. Typically, what we'd see some nice flowy lines here showing that each of these things are occurring. Try that one more time. Anyone have any ideas on that? My fellow Unreal Engine users? Oh, I'm glad. Yeah, Porsche says that it's working, which is great. I'm glad that's working for someone. Yeah, you'll see what that looks like in a second when we make a different blueprint. Oh, and by the way, an earlier question was, can't you just duplicate these actions and then have things happen simultaneously? That's a great question, and the answer is no. If I try to Control-C and Control-V this, I will run into problems. Like if I try to bring this over here now, let's break that. Ooh, you know what? That's new. If we hit play, yeah, there's something weird going on here because certain foundational elements of Unreal Engine I knew to be true do not seem to be applying here. I thought that input actions could not be duplicated, and I swear that I've run into errors before when doing that. But hey, that looks like it would feel pretty much simultaneous. How bizarre. Okay, but all that being said, so we made a blueprint, pretty simple. It's toggling a light on and off. Make sure again that when you're hitting play that you are inside your game window, right? And you notice the point light is turning off as well, just because I happened to make it a child of the spotlight and we're propagating to children there. If we didn't do that, it would just turn off the directional light, which is the sun. See, so that point light stays on now. Set visibility function. So the set visibility function comes up easily if you're coming off of that light component. Someone just asked how to find that. If you just put it in over here, if you're in the middle of nowhere and you type in set visibility, you won't see it. Unless you uncheck context sensitive, which is pretty risky. I recommend usually just leaving that checked, but I can find it this way. And you'll notice there's all sorts of set visibilities that come up. Yeah, but to make sure that you're gonna get the right one, you want to use the context sensitive one. So coming off of light component, that's where you'll find both toggle visibility as well as set visibility. Oh, good question. So yeah, if you're pulling up a node kind of in empty space, you right click just in the middle of nowhere and then you can search for things. But if you are just dragging off of a pin, there's no need to right click. You just left click, pull off of it, and then let go, and it's going to give you that same menu. Set visibility versus set visibility light component is, I can show what the difference between those is. It's basically just converting some elements of this right away. You actually still end up with the same thing for set visibility target is seen component, but one comes with that little converter and one does not. And sorry, in this case, target self, it's looking for something that is inside of this blueprint, which it doesn't have. So in this case, yeah, you actually would want to use set visibility like that. Yeah, as a rule of thumb, this is a very general rule of thumb, but if you see a couple different options and one has an extra part to it, like in this case, light component, it's usually this kind of an Occam's razor sort of thing to just go with the simpler one. And if it doesn't work for some reason, you can always try the other. Okay, so that's there. Okay, so now that we've created our first blueprint, I want to tell you, as a rule of thumb, don't use the example map or the event graph, the level blueprint, the event graph of the level blueprint, because it's not very modular. If you have any functionality in your Unreal Engine experience that you want to be able to use across levels, you want to copy it to other projects, it's very awkward to try to bring this stuff with it. You are going to have to migrate a map, or you'll have to copy all this and then open up your level and then paste it. Because, hey, guess what, though? If you highlight all this and Control-C it, it is actually all just text. So it does look like code when you do it that way, but that also does allow you to copy Unreal Engine blueprints around, whether it's a single node and you're just doing this or something else. Right. So anyway, though, I would say as a rule of thumb, obviously feel free to use the level blueprint. If you're just trying to get something out really quickly, it's not going to be a huge project that needs to perform well. It's a great place to just kind of test things out and mess around. But if you are trying to create a larger project, it's better to create blueprints individually that then are not dependent on a specific level or map and can be copied around. So, for example, just to see what this exact functionality might look like as a standalone blueprint, I'm going to disconnect these pins. So I'm going to right-click on these, wherever it says pressed, and say break link. Break link. There we go. So now, even though everything else is still connected here, nothing's going to happen. If you think of how like a circuit works, so these are not going to be able to function, and you can test that by pressing play and making sure that your buttons no longer work. And we're just going to do a very quick duplicate of exactly what we just did, but as a standalone blueprint. Yes, there's only one blueprint per project, Manny, one level blueprint.
Oh.
And so if we right click,
sorry,
yeah, go ahead.
It's one level blueprint per level, not per project.
Sorry, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, per level, not per project. Yeah, you get a new one per level. So as many levels as your project has, there will be a new one for each of those. For example, if I go to the filters down here in Content Browser, and I actually choose level, it shows me all the levels that came with this project. Every 4 of these has its own level blueprint. So right now, our third-person template project has 4 level blueprints, 1 for each of those maps. That filter function is pretty useful, by the way. By levels, we're talking about maps. Yeah, level's a map. Everything here. Is it possible to disable temporarily a connection where the link is still there but inactive? Not that I've seen. The way I've always done it is literally just to disconnect the pins that I want to reconnect later. Yeah, it's not like, I immediately think of like Adobe Premiere where you could just like right click on something and say disable. I don't see anything like that here. But anyways, so the same functionality we just created, if we go to another level, we're not gonna be able to replicate this. So what's a way to make this something that we can replicate as much as we want, especially if you want to duplicate it here in this map. Like right now, if I duplicated this light source a bunch of times, which can be done simply by holding down Alt and pulling on one of the gizmos here. The level blueprint version we made is still only going to affect that first one. So if we wanted this to happen with 4 things, then this is where standalone blueprints are going to be particularly useful. So the way we might do that, for example, I'm just going to unparent the point light to keep this simple. I'm just selecting my directional light, just this one light source. And there's a bunch of different ways to make a blueprint. And so you can create a blueprint from scratch directly inside the content browser, or you can select an object that's already in your scene. So just to show you what the more common process will look like, let's create a folder inside our content browser. And so you right click and do new folder and call it blueprints, right? All right. And so when you open that up, you can right click in here. And by the way, if you want to maintain your folder structure and understand how everything is connected, it says right here we're in content blueprints, but you can also open the sources panel, which here also shows you your whole folder structure and everything inside of it. It's right there, the sources panel. So I'm going to content, blueprints, and then inside this blueprints folder, I'm right clicking and creating a new blueprint class. And so when you do that, we are going to make an actor class. We're not going to go over how all these different classes are used, but suffice to say, most of the time you will be creating actor classes. Pawn, character, player, controller, those tend to have to do with how your actual character is moving around in a scene. Game mode base is some of the core functionality of how your game is running, but we just want to stick with an actor for now. So we're going to say actor, and now we want to name it. So right now I'm going to do BP underscore light toggle. BP, of course, stands for blueprint. You don't have to call it that. It's just kind of a standard naming convention to remind yourself when you have 1,000 things in your project that BP stands for blueprint. And once that's created, if you double click on that, you're going to see something empty except for this little white ball. This little white ball in the viewport is the default scene root. It's a null object. It's an empty object. It only exists basically to show you where your scene's root is, the 000 origin. It won't show up in the game. And so if we could go up here now to this nice green add component button, and we add a light, for example, like the directional light we just had, or, you know, let's do a point light since we're going to want to replicate this. So if I type in point, and we get point light there, we can choose that. All right, and you'll notice it automatically becomes a child of the default scene root. And we'll call this, yeah, just point light. Point light is fine. You'll notice a little bit about its attenuation. You don't really see much about how it's actually functioning yet. So I'd say, you know, as soon as you have this created, let's go ahead and hit compile. And all we have right now is our point light. And if we minimize that and drop this into the scene, you'll see that it's behaving just like a point light, though you do have a nice big white ball for that scene root. When you don't need that scene root, then you can instead open this up and actually drag the point light onto the default scene root, and that actually gets rid of it. So if you don't need like a parent object that everything else is going to be under, then you can just leave it like that. Okay, so we have our point light. Now that white ball's disappeared, and we can duplicate this a few times, again, by holding down Alt. And we haven't added any functionality yet, but we are still creating several blueprints. This is still considered a blueprint, even though we haven't added any code to it. So we have 4 of these, right? So if we open up one of them now, doesn't matter which one, because they're all referencing the same blueprint. Think of it like a prefab if you're familiar with Unity.
Yeah.
And if you go to the event graph, so we were in the viewport where the light is. Now we're going to the event graph. And we can actually open the level blueprint as well. Blueprint, open level blueprint. And you'll see those are now separate tabs, just like internet browsers. So we can grab whatever functionality we wanted over here and then bring it over. So let's keep this real simple. We're going to grab toggle light and then toggle visibility. Those are the 2 we want to take with us. We could just type those in as well, but I just want to show that it's possible to copy these elements over. So Control C, Control V, and you'll see those paste right over here. And you'll notice that new blueprints by default have these actions, which are grayed out right now because nothing's happening with them. You have begin play, which for like Unity is like void start. Begin overlap, which is more of like a on collision enter sort of thing. And then event tick, which is basically like void update. So for those who don't know Unity, begin play happens as soon as the object exists. And event tick happens every single frame. So if your game is running at 60 frames per second, this will happen 60 times per second. But down here with our input action for toggle light, we're going to drag off from the pressed pin and go to toggle visibility. And now we need to know what to toggle. Well, now we're not dragging anything in from the game window. In fact, that won't work. This is if you're grabbing something that exists in the scene, like just a light source that's hanging out, you can only drag that into a blueprint using the level editor, which is why it is useful when you just want to do something that is very specific to the level you're in. But right now, trying to drag it into here, it won't work because blueprints as standalone blueprints need to be independent from anything else. So you can't tie it to any dependencies that are in the scene. So what we want to toggle is the light that we created as part of the blueprint. So up here, under components, we have our point light. And we're going to drag that down here. And you'll see it just appears just like that. And we're going to connect this blue point light circle to the target. And that connects directly. Ta-da. Does the toggle visibility node work with widget components inside blueprints? Yes, when you get to working with widgets, which I will not be covering today, they will actually work. Thank you, Steve, for answering that as well. So this is basically the same functionality we set up, except watch this now. If I do save all and hit play, we've got our 4 lights up here. And what did I set up? Enter. Let me turn off that other light actually, so it's not distracting. And also I'm going to make these a little bit brighter so it's easier to see. So I'm going back over to point light here, and under light here, there's the intensity. I'm going to make these 10,000. And I'm also going to make the color a little bit more distinct, like a red. And you can see that change right away. So if I were playing with this color right now, that all changes in real time. Okay, so let's see if that does anything. Lumens, yeah, you do get to use actual lumens, Anthony. All right, I'm gonna hit play. And so we see all the purple lights here. And when I'm pressing my input key, nothing is happening. And the reason for that is that we're using it, it's a couple reasons. We're using it across several lights, but also we actually need to tell blueprints to recognize input. And so the way we do that is in any blueprint that's going to have an input action like that, we need to add something usually at begin play, which is called enable input. And so the way I did that, because again, I just did that very quickly, I dragged off from begin play with the left mouse clicker. And then I found enable input. And then target is actor. And we need to find the player controller. So guess what? If you're trying to find something that is called, say, the player controller, this is usually true for anything related to the player. So the camera manager, the player controller, the pawn, you can actually drag off in the other direction from these pin spots and literally type in something like get player controller, and that will get the player 0, which is, you know, the player 1 of who's actually in this right now. If you're dealing with a multi-user experience, this of course becomes more complicated because then you have lots of different player indexes. But if you have a pawn that's just starting in the scene and playing, it's going to be player 0. So this by default is fine. So we can compile that and try hitting play and seeing if it works now. And if I press enter, so here's the other thing. So notice only one of the lights is turning on and off. Now the reason for that is by default, I'll give a break in a second. Skylar wants me to slow down a little bit. The last thing I just want to mention here, then I'll review the last few steps, is that if we want all these to work at once, there's one other thing we need to change with our actions. And I don't know why this is the default, because more often than not, I need to change this. But when we click on this input action, you'll notice up here in details, it says consume input. And what that means is that if this is the first object to use this action, if this is the first, let's say blueprint, if this is the first blueprint to use this input action, then it's going to consume it. It's going to eat it up and then nothing else can use it. So that's why we were only seeing one light working. If we want all these lights to be able to use it, we have to uncheck consume input and then compile. So now when I press play, run up here and see, now everything can turn on and off. Okay, I'm going to pause there for a second, and we're going to do like a little 5-minute break. And also, anyone that has any questions, I'm just going to hang out for a second and make sure we're all caught up. Anyone who has to go, that's totally fine. I'm going to keep hanging out and keep plugging along. But now's a good chance to grab a drink of water, do anything else you might want. And of course, ask me any questions you might have. Yes, let's open that blueprint. So they're right here. So yeah, so if I didn't copy and paste everything over from the level blueprint, you could also do it here. So I'm being asked to reshow light toggle. So yeah, so I'm going to delete this for a second just to show those steps again. So if I right click and do toggle light, which is the action event we made in the input. It's right there, and that's just found by right-clicking anywhere. But then I can also, grab something else, like before I was doing tab. That's fine as well if you haven't set up an input action. So from there, I can drag off the pressed pin and say toggle visibility. And check this out. It actually recognizes that I have a point light in the scene already. So it actually brings it with it. So it actually thought of, hey, you have this component that has the ability to be toggled on and off. Maybe you want that to happen. And so it actually took that with it. And so then I can connect tab. And then the last thing I need to do for both of these again is tell it to not consume input. Yeah, so Manny says my enter key activates all the lights, but the tab key only activates the first set. So yeah, so make sure for both of them, you have consume input unchecked. Andrew's getting graph not editable. Andrew, I actually am not quite sure what that might be. Do you want to share your screen really quick?
Okay, so I got a point light in here.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to event graph. Oh, I got to go over here. There we go. All right. Silly question.
No, this is good. I mean, anyone who has any weird issue, there's a good chance someone else is having it as well. So no, it's great to do this. Anyone else want to share their screen and show any weird issues they're having?
All right. Thank you.
Sure. Okay.
So Alex?
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, my blueprint isn't working. But the other thing is that when we've disabled this light source in the lighting, and then when we run it, that light source comes on again. How do we keep the global illumination from coming on if we're just want to have our point lights be the only light source?
As in you want it to be the only light source in the scene?
Well, because right now, when I'm just editing, my scene is fairly dark except for the light from those point sources. But when I click play, this global illumination comes on, which pretty much swamps the light from the point lights.
Let me see what that looks like real quick.
Okay.
Just minimize and hit play.
Yeah, let me. Okay. So, do you want me to share my screen?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were sharing your screen. I'm looking at someone else's screen right now.
Oh yeah, that's Tina and Skylar's screen.
Okay, go ahead.
I can't find point blank. I mean, I can't find point light.
So point light can be found. Oh, you can see me for a second. It's under Add Component, the big green button. And David, can you real quick just point to point light on the left as well, if you're putting it directly in the scene? Yeah, there's point light. Okay, so yeah, so when you press play, show me what happens.
So this is right. I mean, there's still the sky, obviously, but when I press play, where's all that other light coming from?
Interesting.
And it looks like the light source gets reactivated as soon as I press play.
Oh, how did you turn it off?
I just turned off the
okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have clarified. The eyeball there, and Unity does this as well now too. The eyeball over there is only for the editor, so it's only going to be while you're moving around there. It has no effect whatsoever on gameplay once you press play.
So how do I disable it so it won't come on?
So there's a few different things you could do. Under intensity, you could turn intensity down to 0, or if you want to, keep it at that intensity and turn it off for now, hit the checkbox for visible, which is literally under rendering, the rendering category.
Oh, this.
And that's literally what we're doing with the blueprint is we're turning off those checkboxes.
Got it. Okay. And now it's not, my lights aren't responding to the enter key.
Okay, show me the lights you're trying to turn on and off.
So it's these.
Okay. Okay, so edit the blueprint. And then
so I did this.
Yep.
Enable input, get player controller. And then
okay, here's an interesting question. Did you bake the lighting in your scene?
Not that I know of.
And I bring that up because if someone were to bake their lighting, then it would actually make all the lighting that you're seeing part of the textures. I know you know this, David, but I'm saying it for everyone's benefit. And so then even if you turned off the lightings, you'd still see that.
So how would I check? Where would I look to see if I'd done that?
The easiest thing to do would be to move those lights around a little bit, so that way they would now be casting light in new spots. Okay. And is your input action set up right now?
So I think so. Let me go back to that.
Yeah, and Steve is right as well. Anyone that's having the same issue as David right now, if you get hung up on that not working, yeah, David has enter set up for that. You can just use a direct key input. So let's try adding another one, David. So let's go over into your blueprint again.
Okay.
Excuse me, David, I think you are simulating, not playing.
I am simulating, not playing.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. That's it. That's totally it. You want to do selected viewport.
Selected viewport.
Thank you, whoever pointed that out. Good observation. Now press enter.
Oh,
there we go.
Bingo.
Good job.
Okay, so why would simulating not show me that?
Because simulating doesn't actually run the game. So a lot of, I think even things that happen at begin play don't actually happen yet when you're doing simulate. Simulate is often used for things like physics, like you just want to see how things fall, and you can actually set up blueprints and actions that do occur during simulate, but not this one.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I found that simulate is basically, like Alex said, for physics stuff, or if you want to see, like if you've animated elements in your level, if you want to watch if the lights look correct and stuff like that, it'll kind of run the level live, but you won't have a player to move around or anything like that.
That's right. Anyone else want to share their screen?
Actually, Alex, people keep asking, we've got a couple questions for, can you just quickly, well, not quickly, just whatever, re-show how to add a component to a blueprint actor real quick?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's only do a screen share again, although since you can see my webcam right now, it's this right here. So the big green button that says add component, and you can type in light, and then you see the whole set of light options there, and then you would just select point light.
I don't have add component up.
Sorry, say that again?
I can't find the add component. I only have add new.
Add new. Share your screen. Let's take a look.
You see this?
You are in the example map. That's why. You're not in a separate blueprint right now. You're still in the larger map, and that does not allow you to add components. So did you create a blueprint somewhere?
No.
So right click, I see you created a folder. So if you go ahead and right click down where it says drop files here, or right click to create content, down below. Down at the very, or you can do it from there too. That's another method I was going to show. You can create blueprints and create blueprint class. Yep, there you go. And then actor, and then BP underscore toggle light, or whatever you want to call it.
Oh.
Okay, and there you go. There's add component.
Thank you.
Yep. You can go ahead and do light. Anyone else?
Could you show the whole structure with nodes? I want to check myself.
Hey, Alex, just scroll up in that blueprint so we can see above. What's above up there?
And I'll
zoom in a little.
I'll delete these and put these all together.
Alex, I'm not sure if somebody else is asking a question right now. This is Johnny.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm having an issue where it's every time I try to either simulate or play the game, it says can't play an editor while performing edit light operation. I was just changing the color of the light. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, you probably had like literally the color wheel pulled up.
Sometimes UE4 will get caught in a thing and it thinks it's still doing it and it's not actually doing it. You might have to close UE4 and reopen it. I literally just had this happen while working like this previous week. It thought it thought I was still scaling something in editor and I'm like, I'm not. I had to close UE4 and reopen it and then it forgot that I was doing something. So
okay, I'll try that.
unfortunately,
Thank you.
That's really rare.
Same problem.
Yeah, it's pretty rare and I'm sorry it happened to you all.
This happens a lot in Niagara when you use Niagara a lot, and you can just open another map, and that usually fixes it. And as opposed to closing the whole thing. But I had a quick question. Like this is slightly tangential, but is there any way to override the intensity and the size of the light, the radius? Because it just you stop scrolling, and it's so annoying that most of the time you always have to go bigger than the size of the radius. Does that make sense?
I didn't quite understand that.
Well, if you pop up the light.
The light, yeah, this light here?
Just the light itself. Yeah, the attenuation radius.
Yes.
You can only go to a certain amount.
That's right. And so
is there any way to override that in some way so that you can get it as high as you want, as whenever you want without typing? I'm just talking
not without typing. I think you can only do it by typing.
It's so
same
annoying.
thing with intensity.
Yeah, it's so annoying. I've never used light where it's without inverse off. That it works for me.
Yeah, and by the way, anyone that just wants their light to be crazy intense, if you hit the little drop down under volumetric scattering and intensity, if you uncheck use inverse squared fall off, you're going to get a very intense light because it's not really falling off as much anymore. Just see what that does to my scene. Yeah, see. So that's with that unchecked.
Steve, thanks, by the way. That did fix the problem, just restarting it.
Great.
Alex, what's the difference in the intensity? CD, is there different types of intensity?
I think that's candelas. Anthony probably knows.
versus lumens.
Yeah. I think that's right. Yeah, it's only fairly recently that Unreal Engine started using real light units. All right, let me pull the chat up again. All right, should we continue on? What do you guys think?
Absolutely.
Great, got a couple yups. 3 yups is all I need. All right, so now that we've kind of played around a little bit in this map, let's go and create a new level. So file and then new level. And you can save this if you want, the third person map. It's gonna first say what kind of map you want. We're gonna just do a default one. Default, and then it's gonna ask us if we wanna save these. You can go ahead and save them if you want to. Just remember what we've done so far. You'll notice that it will save the map separately from the blueprints. So those are different objects that are not linked to each other independently. You're not seeing the blueprint for me here because I already saved it, but you are seeing built data, which is just about light baking. Don't worry about that too much. But you'll notice that it's not like in a lot of other programs where you're just automatically saving everything. Unreal will often ask you, which things do you want to save? And by default, of course, you can uncheck or check everything. Anyways, here we are in an empty scene. You'll notice there's no third-person character here. But if I were to press play, a third-person character appears. And we'll go into this maybe very briefly at the end, but the reason for that is that the game mode right now is set up to be third-person game mode, and that by default says, even in a new scene, generate that third-person character. If the third-person character is already there, it won't make it again, but it's just right there. So we're going to try to build a platform that starts to go out and turns a little bit. We'll start real simple with this. we're going to go into blueprints, and we're going to create a new blueprint class. So again, just real quick, a few different ways to do blueprint class. Right-clicking and doing it there. Drop down here, new empty blueprint class. Add new blueprint class, and then even selecting, you know, an object that's in the scene. And then I believe even from there, maybe you have to do it from here. There's some way. Oh, there we go, blueprint right there. So a whole bunch of ways to create a blueprint. But because this is going to be such a modular element, oh, how to change the light color, really quick, changing light color. Any light you have, whether it's in a blueprint or not, scrolling down in the details, you can find light color under light and pick anything you want. And by the way, if you find a light you particularly like, you can always drag it over here to save it and start to build a little palette. Okay, there's the light. We're not doing a light right now, no more lights. We are going to create a very modular platform that is going to propagate and create a little bit of a procedural level. And so again, we're going to create a blueprint class. This will be an actor. We're going to type BP underscore. Call this whatever you want. I'm going to call it plat piece, short for platform piece. And when I open that up, you're going to see again our friendly little empty space box. And the first thing I'm going to add for a component is a cube. And this comes in by default, I believe, at 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. And you know what, just so we can start to see how this relates to the level as we're building it, even with just that cube in there, I'm going to compile and minimize and just drag this into the scene. So you'll notice this is pretty big. Also, if you want to have the reference for the size of the player, if you wanted to, you could type in under search content, third person character, and you could actually bring in the whole blueprint class or even just the mesh if you wanted to do that way. But just to have a reference for the size of the character, I'm just going to bring
I'm sorry, where did you find that to drag it into the?
Yep, so I over here under search content, so content, search content, I typed third, and then that brought up everything related to third person. And then, you know, like if I just wanted to find the mesh, for example, I could filter under the filters option by static mesh. Oh, nothing came up for that. I wonder, it must use something else. I'm just curious real quick if I pull that up. The mesh is called SK Mannequin.
Where is the cube once you've created it in the blueprint?
So by default, it's going to go right to the center. So the default scene root is in the middle. And so it doesn't go in the scene, by the way. When you create a blueprint, it does not automatically appear in the scene. I'm going to go back over to blueprint. So it'll just exist in your project by default. So what I did is I dragged it out of the blueprints window into the scene, and then whenever I let go of my mouse, that's where it'll be.
Roger.
Okay, yeah, so this gives us some sense now of the scale. So like right off the bat, I might be thinking, okay, like that's an okay width for a platform, a little bit skinny, but should be okay. But I certainly want it to be flatter, and I'm going to want it to maybe be longer as well, especially when you think about the fact that we're going to have this replicating itself. We probably want to have, you know, maybe a 3-to-1 ratio of that size. So opening this up again, first thing I'm going to want to be thinking about is where it's starting. So in this case, I'm going to leave the default scene root because I don't want to use the center of the cube. I want to use that pivot point to be the center of this blueprint because we're going to have the platform spawn from there where the default scene root is and then kind of progress outwards. So let's start by flattening our platform a little bit. So maybe the scale wants to be 0.1, right? And if we wanted to be very precise with making this like flush with the ground when we place it, we could go into another viewport. Viewports, by the way, are accessible over here. By default, you're in perspective, but then you have all these other ones as well. And I could, you know, basically say, whoop, and you might have some trouble with snapping if you're trying to get something to be precise. You can turn off grid snapping if you want there, or you can also change the precision of it as well. I'm just turning it off for the moment. So in the upper right of your viewport, there's all sorts of options. There's movement, rotation, scale for when you're modifying the widgets. You also can go between local and world space. And then there's various snapping options. And then what I mentioned about scaling and moving the camera. So see, now that I turned off snapping, I can be a little bit more fluid with this. So I'm going to put this right about there. And then I'm going to want this to be 3 times the size of what it is right now. So I think that's the x-axis. So let's type 3. And then again, we're going to have to drag that to a line here. And there's a good chance when you're working with nice round numbers like I am right now, that if you want things to be really precise, you can probably round these things down. So this wants to be, or you can, sorry, round them to a whole number. So this number here for the location on the z-coordinate probably wants to be -5. And the x-coordinate probably wants to be 150. So that's just a way to make everything a little more precise. And then I'm going back to perspective, and we see we have a platform. That's a start. And if we compile that, we'll also see that it now exists here in our scene. And you know what? We're probably going to be running forward, so I can actually just start to put that there. And in fact, you don't have to do this, but if I were to hit play right now, oh, hello, other person. It's already something I can stand on because it has collision values by default. And if I fall down, then, you know, that's what happens there. So the first thing we want to do is make this propagate out in a straight line. We're basically going to want to have it do the equivalent of this. And the way we'll do that in the blueprint is we'll start by just using an action or an event the same way that we've been doing before. So we'll go over to the event graph. And we could, if you feel so inclined, you are more than welcome to create something over an input. I'm going to try to minimize the amount that I'm jumping between windows. So you're welcome to do that if you remember how you did toggle light. I'm just going to keep this real simple for a moment. And here in my event graph, I'm just going to use the P key, P for platform. And I can type in P key. Sometimes depending on the key, it'll come up right away. Sometimes you have to scroll until you see this little keyboard icon. And then it can be a little bit harder, but this is all alphabetical order. So there's the P key. So I'm going to say that when I press the P key, I am going to spawn something. So if I type in spawn, you see a bunch of different choices. And you want to find spawn actor from class. And right now it says spawn actor none because we have not told it how to spawn. And again, just a reminder, the easiest way to do that is dragging off of that pin for P when you press something. Type in spawn, and then you can also type spawn actor from class. So a class is a blueprint, essentially. So every time you create a new blueprint, that is its own class. So you'll notice here, when I hit the drop down for classes, you see all the different kind of default blueprints that are built into Unreal Engine. But then also, if we type BP underscore, you'll see the one that we made, BP platform piece, plat piece, which is also this. There is a way, by the way, to tell the class to reference itself, which can be useful sometimes if you're, duplicating classes and have a few different variations. But I'm going to keep this simple. And for now, just find the class that has the same name as the one that you currently have. Now, right now, if I hit compile, it's going to get upset because it's saying, hey, you haven't told it where to go. So transform again. Transform is your rotation, your location, and your scale all put together. Luciano wants to know where P came from. I just chose P for platform. You can make it anything you want. And I'm also going to, well, I'll leave consume input on now for the moment. For demonstration purposes, you'll see why. Yeah. Yeah, when I'm picking an action key, there's usually not much reason behind it. It's usually a mnemonic device. Like I'm going to remember P because P is what platform starts with. Okay, so when you have your node, again, dragging off P, spawn actor from class, it's going to appear right there. And then under the dropdown for class, you want to find BP underscore plat piece or whatever you called this blueprint, and you'll see the name up there. The next thing we need to do is tell it where to spawn. So for the transform, we can do, well, and actually, again, sorry, just to demonstrate what the transform is. So if I right click on transform, you don't have to do this, just watch for a moment. If I hit split structural pin, it actually divides the transform out into its constituent parts. So you see location, rotation, and scale. And in fact, if I do that now there are values there. It's not a null value. You see these are 0, 0, 0, and 1, 1, 1. So I can actually compile now because those are values. And if I were to press play, I don't have to do this. I'm just doing it for demonstration purposes. Some things I want you guys to keep up with me for, other things I just want you to watch. If I hit play right now and hit my P key, oh, you know what I forgot to do is enable input. So same thing we did before over under begin play, enable input, and then get the player controller. Same thing we did for the light switcher. Now, sorry, if I hit play and press P, I'm spawning it, but where is it?
So it's a glitch. That level that you're standing on, that floor piece, trust me, I hate this, that this isn't the default level.
Yeah.
It's not at 0, it's above 0. Look at the transform on it. If you drop it down, you'll see it spawn in now.
Great. There it is. Yep.
Good.
Thank you, Steve.
It was inside your floor, sorry.
Yeah, there it is. I was like, I see it appearing in the world outliner, but yeah, there it is. So right now it's spawning in 0, 0, 0. So now though, we should actually pick where we actually want to spawn it. And the easiest way to do that, rather than typing in specific vector coordinates and figuring out, exactly where it wants to be in relation to all the math that we've done so far with our transforms, is actually just to create another empty object and basically have that be the spawn point. So if I add a component, and if I find scene, just an empty scene component, essentially the same thing as that scene root, then I can call this, click it once to change its name if you need to. I'm going to call this straight spawn. And the reason I'm calling it straight spawn is because we're also going to be doing left and right. Or if you want this to be more alphabetical, maybe I'll do spawn underscore C, C for center. Everyone has their own naming conventions. I like things that are similar to all start with the same word. And so now, by default, that's right here. And we just want to move it all the way down there. And so we know, just based on the approximation of how I just dragged it out, that that wants to be 300. This wants to be 0. And now we have a spawn point. So now what we need to do, back over in the event graph, is we'll drag that spawn point object into here, bring it down, 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 down. And I can't connect this directly to spawn. Sorry, I'm going to collapse this again back to spawn transform. I can't connect this directly. I mean, a clue to you should be that the colors are different, because right now this is just an actor reference. And sometimes you'll notice, like what happened with our light, you can get a conversion and it'll take care of it automatically. But sometimes you have to help it out a little bit. It's not quite sure what we're trying to get from our spawn point. So if we're going to help it out, we can drag away from spawn C and say get I think we want to find get world transform. There it is. Get world transform. And again, that's much easier to find if you're dragging out from your actor rather than just right clicking and doing it in the middle of nowhere, because you'll probably see several versions of that. And then once you have get world transform, guess what? You can just connect that right into spawn transform. Give everyone a second there to catch up.
Can you create that spawn point again, please?
How did we make the spawn point?
Yeah, could you show us again, please?
Can you go all the way? Sorry, also go all the way to show people how to get the P key. A few people weren't sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. So the way
you have to scroll up.
Right. So if you created a custom event, then you can just search for the custom event, like toggle light was the one we had before. But if you just want to use a key, you just need to find the key. So if I type in P key, it's a little bit hard because you have to scroll. It doesn't come up right away. So I scrolled up until I found all the things that have a keyboard icon. And then I scrolled all the way over to, it's alphabetical, so I scrolled down to P. Also, if there's a key that you know you like to use a lot, there's a little chance to favorite it. You can actually put a little star next to things. And then it's just more likely to float to the top when there's a lot of results. That's something I've used only a few times, but it's a nice little trick. But yeah, literally every key on your keyboard is there. If you're using a gamepad, you can see all sorts of different gamepad options. ML stands for Magic Leap. All sorts of choices there. Okay, and then spawn is when you're dragging off that, you can type in spawn, and you want to find spawn actor from class again being blueprints. And then once you change the name to what you're actually spawning, it won't say spawn actor from class, it'll say spawn actor and then the name of the blueprint that you're spawning. And in this case, of course, we're spawning the same name as the blueprint we have. And to answer Steve's question about Magic Leap, I have a Magic Leap course on the Unreal Online Learning Portal. And as part of becoming a licensed Unreal instructor, I have to make one more of these courses. And so next week, I'll be doing Magic Leap for Unreal Engine as kind of a companion piece to the Unreal Online Learning course I have, since a few things have changed since I made that about a year ago. Spawn C. Oh, so okay, going back to how I created the Spawn C scene component, I named it that because we're going to be spawning a platform in the center. But again, the way that was made was by add component and then finding the same icon as the default scene root. So it's called scene. Hover there for a second so everyone sees it. And then once that pops up, you can give it a name, and I just called mine Spawn C. And we're going to create a few of these because we're going to have a few different spawn points for where this platform can end up. Everyone okay here?
Yep. Could everyone check that they're muted? Somebody has some like road noise going on. Thanks.
Yeah. Might be Twan. There you go. Okay. So if you have that all set up like so, I won't throw it away entirely. I'll just put it off to the side a little bit. Then when you hit play now, in theory, if you go over to the platform over here, the one that we already placed, when I hit my P key, look, it creates a new platform and a new one and a new one, et cetera, et cetera. And it keeps extending out. Now, there's an interesting little trick here that I do want to take a moment to explain. And if you remember when we went over consume input, I talked about how if you do have consume input checked, it's only going to let one item use that input, one blueprint, for example. And so what's actually happening here is because I do have consume input still checked, it's only letting the most recently made version of platform piece spawn a new one. But if I had that unchecked, watch what happens now. Keep an eye on the world outliner here. If I press P, now it's creating a ton because every time I press P, every single platform is creating a new platform. So that's a quick way to crash your game. And so there is another way to do that. If for any reason you wanted to make sure that the same key could be used for multiple things, so you didn't want to have consume input checked, the way to make sure that that doesn't happen, what I just showed you, is a great little node called do once. So that's under flow control. And that will make sure that this will only happen one time, which is exactly what we want for this platform. A platform should only ever spawn one other platform. And so again, if you want to uncheck consume input, so the P key could be used for other things, do once is going to be your best friend to make sure that you don't end up with billions of platforms in your scene. And again, notice that the way I did that was I dragged off from pressed and typed do once in there, which automatically bridged it between the P key and the spawn actor node and put it right in between them. Because again, if you do something like that out over here, then I'd need to go through a whole to-do about like reconnecting everything. Yes, Steve. So right now it's making a line of them. So just to see what this looks like in practice. And you know what? I'm going to give this a material as well, just because the white is a little bit hard to read there. If you have all the starter materials set up, then if you click on your cube, and you know what, let's rename this platform. Under materials, you'll see by default it's the basic shape material. I'm going to click that and find a wood material. How about some pine or oak? Let's do oak. Now it's to compile that. Let's do pine because it was already ready to go. Just to make it a little easier to see. There we go, right? So now when I press play and I press the P key a bunch of times, now we've just created a platform to nowhere. I'll show the consume once setting again. It's under your actions. So anytime you have an event there, anything that's red, then you have that option for consume input. Yeah, and so again, to clarify how exactly it's doing what it's doing, basically what we're doing is we're saying when you press the P key, literally when it's pressed, not when it's held down and not when it's released, then one time it's going to spawn a new actor at a specific location. So we're saying to spawn this piece, which is called BP plat piece, and we're telling it to spawn that at the location of our spawn C coordinate. Yeah, so spawn C is an empty game object that literally just exists to say, hey, here's an important transform. Here is a location and a rotation and a scale that is useful for spawning purposes. And even though this is an empty object, if I were to change the scale, you know, to even something crazy, for example, if I were to press play now, then we'd start to see, whoops, we'd start to see all sorts of crazy stuff happening. See that? Because that's what's important about this empty game object is we are saying these are all the this is all the data for scale, rotation, and location that should be used when placing the next one of these over on the other end. I'm being asked if I can recreate it. Yeah, I'll make another one really quick just so people see it. Although really quick, before I forget, I do want everyone to see what I wanted to be working in the level blueprint, which is that you see how the logic of blueprints work when you get to press play in them. So right now, here in our debug filter, I have this platform piece selected that's in the scene. And if I press play, now watch this. If I'm in the scene and I press P, there we go. That's what I thought should have been happening in the level blueprint. That great little orange flow going through there is telling you that it's active. And if I press P again, notice that it's getting stuck at do once because we already did it once, even though we're seeing more platforms being created in the distance. And the reason for that is we are still only looking at the blueprint for the very first platform that was there. So if we wanted to see what's going on with the other platforms, we would do Shift F1. If someone wouldn't mind typing that into the chat, that's a really good shortcut to know. Shift F1, which gets me out of there for a moment. We're still in play, but it gets my mouse out of there. And then you'll see all the platform pieces that are in here right now. So now if I were to go to the very newest one that was created, plat piece 7, and then click again, now if I press P, there we go. We see the whole blueprint chart happening again because that last one just created the next one. Thank you for typing that, Steve. Yeah, so I called it spawn C because it's spawn center, and we're going to be creating spawn left and spawn right. So really quick, I'm just going to create exactly that node again. First, I need to save this map. This lat map we're going to call plat piece testing ground. Or, you know, call it anything you want. So just again, to show that process again, have a problem when pressing P adds another platform, but appears on top of the existing. So Matt Larson, that means that you either have consume input unchecked, or you don't have the do once node, which again looks like this. So you need to have either that or consume input checked. So you don't need this. Again, I'll go over this when I recreate it, but you either don't need that if you just have consume input checked, or if you want to have that unchecked because you want to leave the P key open to doing other things, then you need to have do once. Yes, and that's right. Yeah, thank you, Lillian. Make sure that you move that spawn C point to the other end of the platform. So default scene root is the big white circle, and that's where everything is starting. And then spawn C needs to be all the way at the other end of the platform. Because if it's there, yes, that it'll keep spawning on top of itself. Okay, so just again real quick, oh yeah, and make sure you have enable player controller. Anytime that you're gonna have a blueprint with input, you need to make sure that you're enabling input in the player controller. Looks like that, but okay, real quick, let's just go over creating this whole thing from scratch again for anyone who missed any steps along the way. And then the next step will be fun because we're gonna start having it randomize how it gets created. But so I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna go new blueprint class. Oops, sorry, I did import. Off to a great start. And is Unreal gonna crash? No, don't crash. Oh, it did crash. That's okay. Good thing I just saved, right? All right, let's open that up again. How did I add the material to the platform? I'll show that again, but it's over under, it's over under the rendering part of the details panel. What is this called? What are we calling this? Platformer, something like that? Platformer. I would say, yeah, I would say for me, Unreal crashes more than Unity. I probably use Unity and Unreal equally, and things are a little worse on this end. And I think a lot of that just has to do with how hard we're hammering the graphics card. I mean, a lot of times I do have RTX on and all sorts of things like that. Okay, so I did not change my default scene map, so it still opened up my third-person template, but an easy way to get over to my other map is, you know, I just saved it. Where did I save that map? I don't even know. Well, a couple ways I could find my map again. One is File and Recent Levels. There's that there. Or I could just do Filters by Level, and there it is. So where did I save it? Oh, it's in third-person maps. I can see the path right there. Okay, so let's try again. Let's create this whole platform again from scratch just to make sure we're all on the same page. I'll go over everything that I just did here. So I'm going blueprints. And by the way, if you're already caught up and want to grab a drink of water, something like that, good chance for a quick break. So I'm going right click, blueprint class. It's going to be an actor. I'm going to type BP. I want to give this a totally different name. I'm going to call it temp flat piece. So I don't have too much confusion. And then when I open it up, first thing I'm going to do is add a cube. So add component, cube, and that's going to be way too big. I'm going to also change the name of it and call it plat piece. I'm going to keep it under the default scene root because I want that scene root to serve as the anchor. And then I think, if I remember correctly, I think the way I changed the scale of this, scale options for this are over under details and transform. I have the cube selected, and I'm changing the Z coordinate to 0.1. And I think we decided the Y coordinate was fine at 1. And then we want the X to be 3. I think that's right. Okay. And then we're going to want to move this all the way out to about there so that this is the starting point for it. You want to think of this as having directionality. That red arrow should serve as an idea of the forward vector for how this is happening. And so again, you can kind of eyeball it. And then if you look up at what you've done, it's kind of like, okay, that gives you a sense of where these probably want to be. So in this case, 150, 0, 0. Right? So now that we have that set up, the other thing we want to create in here is the spot where the next one will spawn, which will be over at the other end. So I'm going to go add component and scene. And I'm going to call this spawn underscore C, because this is for spawning at the center. We'll also have a spawn L and a spell on R for spawning going left and spawning going right. And this can be a child of plat piece. We're not going to be moving this stuff around, so it's okay to keep them separate if you want. If you attach it by accident and want to unattach it, you just drag it on top of its parent that toggles between attachment and not attachment. And so with spawn C existing, now we drag it to the other side. Again, keep the rotation elements the same. The scale, ooh, that's interesting. Oh, actually, that's interesting. This is important to note, by the way. Notice the scale changed. Because I had spawn C under the platform piece, see, this is those originals, that original scale value of 111. And now when I pulled it out, it has the same scale as platform piece. So I take back what I just said. You don't actually want this to be a child of platform piece because we are scaling this, and that could screw up certain things with the spawning. So make sure this is actually a separate object. I'm gonna need a water break in a second. And so with this as its own separate object, now we wanna reset these values back to 1. Because even though platform piece is at a different scale, the scene root object, this is still 111. This parent object still has a normal scale, which is typically what you want. As soon as you start changing these scale elements, it's easy to get confused. So back over in spawn C, again, we just kind of want to normalize these values. So that wants to be 0, and this wants to be 300. And then over here, we can delete these two for now, but we are going to use begin play. I'm over in the event graph, by the way, just for anyone who wants to keep track. I'm going from the viewport to the event graph. And then from begin play, we need to make sure that the P key is going to work. So I'm going to do enable input. And then I'm dragging off of the player controller pin and typing in player controller. And there that is. So that's going to work now for input. And now we can get any key we want. I did the P key before. This time I could do, who knows, let's try page down. Why not? Some keys obviously are easier to find than others if they have really unique names. There's only one option that comes up when you start typing page D. 2 options if you just type page. And then once that's there, dragging from pressed, we're going to want to spawn from class, spawn an actor from class. And then the class is going to be the same as this one, temp plat piece. There that is. And then we need to get our transform, which is going to come from our spawn C empty game object. So again, you just drag that spawn C object right into here, the same way that with the level blueprint, we were dragging directly from the world outliner into the level blueprint. Here, this is your little world. Your tiny world exists inside the components, and those can be dragged directly into here as references because they, of course, will be included with every instance of this blueprint. So now spawn C will not connect directly to spawn transform. So we have to do get world transform and then connect it there. And then we have that little quirk right now where because consume input is checked, everything will be fine, but people might not know why it's fine. So just to make it a little bit more deliberate, I'm going to uncheck consume input, which also again makes it so other things can use page down. And I'm going to add in that do once variable, not variable, it's a, what do we call this? A modifier, an event, some part of flow control. And then that's going to make sure that this can only spawn, each platform can only spawn one other platform. That way they're not stacking 1,000 times on top of each other. Okay, and now in theory, oh, and then David was asking about material. So if I click on my little platform piece, static mesh component over here under static mesh, and then materials, by default, it's that basic shape material, but you could type in, you know, metal, brick, clay. There's all sorts of default materials that come with Unity. I'll make this one metal. Why not? Metal, steel. Everything's okay here. Save all. And then there it is. And this one will work the same way. So I hit play. So my P key just does that one. And then what did I do? Page down. Where's my page down? Page down does that one. And now look, I can create a little race. Why not? Okay, I'm gonna go get a quick drink of water, and then the next step, we'll be setting up a couple other spawn points so that we can also randomize whether the next platform will be straight or start to turn. And if anyone wants to get started trying that on their own before I walk through it, my hint is you're going to be doing more of these. So what you're going to need to be thinking about, you can duplicate these and call them left and right. And you're going to want to think about not just where these get located, but then also the rotation. The rotation is going to be important as well. So I'll go over that in just a minute. Be right back.
And if anybody has any other questions, feel free to throw them out, and hopefully I can answer them.
I have a question, if it's probably a little bit too big for like what we're doing here, but what is like the process with creating like a global array? I'm trying to build an audio manager that persists between like levels and that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. So, it's your question isn't really how to make the array; it's how to save it or make it persist between levels, right?
It needs to manage a large number of audio files and be able to call them in like a 3-dimensional way.
Right.
So it has to spawn components. It has to do a lot of different things. And I know that that's obviously like a huge question, but yeah. I figured I could at least ask the first part of that.
Sure, I can try and point you in the right direction. So if you needed to do this with like persistence, meaning like between levels, like in any level, and you wanted to also remember choices that were made previously. If you don't need it to remember choices that were made previously, you can put this functionality on the player because the player is going to be in every level.
Okay.
And then you can make sure that it spawns it from the player, right?
Right.
If you do need it to remember what happened and have that remember what happened on the previous level because that impacts something on the next level, then what you'll want to do is you'll want to store that data on what's called the game instance. And the game instance is similar to the game mode. It's persistent above the level system, right? And it will always stay loaded and it will never be unloaded until you close the application. So you can store that kind of data in the level instance. If you need it to be saved between playthroughs, then you're going to have to look up how to make a save system in Unreal.
Yep.
And it's all done through Blueprints as well. You can do all of that with Blueprints. You don't have to know any code. And I hope that answers your question.
No, that totally, yeah.
Okay.
I have the really complex 4-hour-long tutorial of how to do this, and I've gotten like most of it, but there are some gaping holes, and that's what I'm doing here is to try and fill the holes.
Mm-hmm. Nope, totally understand.
Okay, who's ready to do some procedural platform generation with some left and rights, and we'll even do a
Let's
jump.
do it.
Hooray! I like to hear that attitude. So up here, you can either do add component, although it's much easier to just do duplicate. And so let's do a couple here. So we'll do left, 3 actually, 4 total, left, right, and then we'll do one that will be a space, and this will be if you need to jump. So you can just call it jump to be extra clear. You could also name these right, left, center, whatever naming convention you like. And then you just got to put these in the right spot. I'll actually start with jump because that one's probably the easiest. Guess what? You're just going to scoot that out to however far you want to make the player jump. And the third-person player by default can jump pretty far. So, some play testing would help you figure out where this wants to be. But if you want the whole thing to be kind of like a grid, you can remember that this is 300. So a jump could be just literally skipping one spot. So you could do 600. Or if you want to give them a real challenge, you could do 900. I'll do the 600 to make it, you're skipping a platform. The left one is going to, and I want to make sure I'm doing this right, I'm going to try to spawn it so that it's, actually, you know what, I'll demonstrate what I'm going to try to do over here. So if I duplicate this, I just duplicated, by the way, with Control W. That's another way. So holding Alt and then dragging is one way to duplicate something. And then just having something selected and doing Control W, that's another way. So I think the way I'm going to have it create the next platform is going to be something like this. Or I could do it like this. Actually, I'll do it like this. This feels a little more interesting to me. And so the way that we're going to do that then is see that where that white dot is, that's exactly where we're going to want our spawn point to be. So to make that happen, go into our platform piece. And so this is going to be for the left turn. So the left turn is going to want to be right about here. So first, let's get it to about the right spot. And the grid is helpful here because you'll notice that at least I am using that 1 meter block size. Unreal Engine is in centimeters, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know. All the units there for location is centimeters. And so now the only other thing I need to do here is rotate it. So we're going to rotate on the Z axis, the one pointing up. So we'll go 90 degrees, or negative 90 actually. We want that red arrow pointing forward. And there we go. So that will spawn a left platform going that way. And then for the right platform, we're going to do exactly the same thing, just on the other side. So about there. Oh, I don't think I made that adjustment a minute ago. I will, because we want those numbers to be as accurate as possible. So rotating 90, and then it looks like the Y wants to be 50, and that wants to be 0, and this wants to be, 250? I think it wants to be 250, yes. So 250, 50, 0, 0, 0, 90, and then the left one, which I forgot to normalize, wants to be 250, negative 50, whoops, I did 50 instead of negative 50, 50, 250, negative 50, 0. Okay? So there's all those spawn points. I'll give everyone a second to catch up. So we have our center, our left spawn, our right spawn, and our jump. And yeah, basically all we're going to need to do is have some method of randomly selecting which of these spawn points to use when we are spawning our transform. Because right now, all we have is spawn C. Instead, we want to do some options. And you know what? There's the super simple way that we could go over this right now, which would be setting these up in an array and doing it directly into here. I actually really want to teach you guys something that I wish I learned a lot sooner in Unreal Engine. It's about an inch more difficult, but I want you guys to learn this quickly. And what we're going to do actually is use the construction script. Because it took me years to actually start using this, and this is a good opportunity to use the construction script. While everyone's finishing up with their spawn points, I'll just briefly explain that the construction script is kind of like your event graph, except it's an opportunity to have things be set up right away. So that way you're not bogging down your computer with unnecessary calculations or generation of elements after the game has already started. And so something like this, where we need to have an array set up of different spawn points.
How to add the construction script menu on the top?
Oh, you don't see that. That's interesting. It should be under, I would guess, View or Window. Window. I've never not seen the construction script there. Maybe under Layout, Load Layout, Default Editor Layout. That might get it back for you.
No.
No? That's weird. Do you want to share your screen really quick?
You can click on it from the My Blueprint section.
From My Blueprint, window.
Where it says Functions, Construction Script.
Oh, over here, yeah. Do you see it? Do you see it over here? Great. Excellent. Good team effort. Right. So basically, it doesn't make sense, or assuming again that we are bogged down in calculations, which we're certainly not in a simple project like this. But I want you guys to learn best practices. So if we were dealing with a complex project, we wouldn't necessarily want to be building arrays from scratch at runtime. So instead, we can build the array before runtime and do it right now in the construction script. So the same setup that we were going to use to set up an array of different spawn points and then randomly pick one, we're just going to do it instead over here in the construction script. And so to start, we can grab all of our scene components over here, and they're all going to pop up right there. And we probably want our center one to be the most common one, and then maybe our jump one to be the least common one. And there are certainly ways to set this all up by percentages, but honestly, the easiest way to do this, the way that I use the most, is just with an array where I'm putting these into multiple slots. And so the way this works is I'm going to create the array as a variable. We have not talked about variables yet. So a variable, like if you remember algebra in math class or used any other program that has variables, is a place where you're going to store a value. So it's something that you want to remember. And in this case, we're going to build an array. And for those who don't know what an array is, I like to think of it as a bunch of drawers. You have a bunch of empty drawers and you're putting stuff in them and then you're retrieving them later. But it's some way to keep a bunch of like elements that have some kind of important relationship to each other together. Would it also work to have the platform spawn rotation be based on the player's forward vector? You could do that, except the player forward vector is always going to be slightly off. I'd say by all means, go ahead and play with that, but it's going to be not quite as clean of an experience. I mean, it would look kind of cool because you could just run in any direction and it would always put a platform in front of you. There wouldn't be much of a challenge to it. I kind of like that. Can we hold P and click on the keys to choose the platform kind spawned? Yes, that's more advanced than what we're going over today. But yeah, I've done something similar with creating like an interior design VR experience where you can hold down different options for what's going to spawn in a room and pretty much do what you're describing. But anyways, to create our variable, which is an array, which is going to store these different values and then select one of them randomly, down here in the variables menu, we're going to do plus variable, and then we're going to give it a name. And so we're going to say spawn options or spawn ops, whatever you want to say, spawn options. And then we're going to have to change the type. By default, when you create a variable, it's a Boolean, so it's just going to be true or false. These are going to be transforms. So again, the way I did that was I had it, which by default, I had spawn options created, which started out as a Boolean. And then up in the upper right under details, for variable type, I changed the variable type from Boolean to transform, since that's the data we're trying to get from these. And so now, though, it's still only looking for a single kind of object. So we want to change this to an array. It's not a kind of object. It's looking for literally one object, one actor. And we want this to be a bunch of actors as part of the same array. So if you click the little pill and you change to the grid, the 9x9 grid, that's going to be an array. Okay? And so if we drag this out now, out of variables, and we say set spawn options. By the way, another little pro tip, when you're dragging stuff out from variables, if you just drag it out, it'll ask you whether you want to get the value of the variable or set it. But if you hold down Alt while you're dragging out, it'll automatically do set. And if you hold down Control as you're dragging out, it'll automatically do just here's the value of it. Yes, our spawn points are basically transforms. All of these that we made are empty game objects that have nothing about them except for their location, rotation, and scale. In Unity, it would just be an empty game object. Can I make it seek a spawn point? Yes, I could get component. I think there's something like get components by class. So I could do it this way. I think transform maybe. No, because this is by the variable values. Let me be clear. Every single thing I'm showing you guys today, there are 1,000 different ways to do it. I am just showing you what I find for today is the best balance between easiness, and also trying not to get you guys in some of the bad habits that I ended up in because I sometimes took the easy path too often and then ended up with some really bogged down, not great experiences, especially in VR. So just to show the way that we're going to want to put this together, we are going to have the set array, which is here. Again, drag it out, choose set spawn options. And right now this array is empty. It has nothing in it. We can compile, and you can see over here, there are 0 array elements. And we're going to want to put stuff in this array. So we want to add to this array. Oh, wait, sorry. Make array. Here we go. So we're going to make an array and then set it to that value. So we're going to add some pins here. But I'm actually going to make more than the number of pins we have because I mentioned the probabilities. So I want there to be basically equal probabilities for left, right, and I guess jump. Jump can also be equally probable to left and right. You could also do more there. And then I'm going to make all the rest of these straight. So there's much more of a chance of getting a straight panel than the other options. But you can do that however you like. And now we're going to need to convert this array into one that will hold transform variables. Let's see. I'm realizing I'm doing this a little bit different from how I did before, where I did not actually set up the array. I did this as a standard actor array. So just so I'm not trying to remember how to do a conversion right now, I'm just changing this back to actor, object types actor. This will just make it easier to do a direct conversion here. So yeah, anytime you want to change a variable, you just type in what you want it to be. I clicked actor layer at first, not actor layer. You want object type actor. And then let's see, right now it says array of scene objects is not compatible with array of actor objects. So these are scene objects. This is actor objects. You know what, I'm going to cheat for a second and look very briefly at how I did this when I was planning this. Just blanking on this one spot.
Alex, if you want the super easy cheat version to get one out of your array, you could just pull off that array and say promote variable, and it'll give you the correct variable type if you wanted to pull that single variable out.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. Let me show what that actually looks like. And actually, I thought I did this a different way, but I actually did it exactly the way that I'm was about to show. Let's see. Yeah, so anytime you're missing a variable, like here, you can right click it and say promote to variable, and then it will literally just create it right there and then have it coming right off. Yeah. So then see, it's going right to what I was trying to do up there. And then I could have it all set this way. Yeah, so just to compare, I won't do it the same way that I was just about to, but just to compare these two different options, both equally valid. So we left these all as actors and we just created an array of actors. The way I did it in my test version of this project was I had the array be, oh, I hate that you can't have both up at the same time. I did everything as a transform array and got the world transforms from each one. So instead what we're gonna do is because we just kept everything as an actor array, we're just going to get the world transform from whichever one is selected. So actually, all in all, the way we're doing it now is going to have fewer total nodes. Here we are. Okay, so everyone's in the construction script. Hopefully you have your scene components here. You found
Sorry, how to make a blue set instead of red set?
So what Steve just said is a really good piece of advice. Rather than trying to change the existing array you have, so like I created spawn options and I tried to change it a bunch, just delete it. That's the easiest thing to do. And then right click on array. And I have to do a new one here so I can show what it looks like. Oops, sorry. So when you have your make array, that you dragged a bunch of stuff into. You have to drag something into it. So just as an example of that. So now it knows what kind of array this is. And then you can right click on there and say promote to variable. And then it will just add in something over here, which will be exactly the right variable type for what you're trying to do. That way you don't have to think so much about how different things are connecting. So I'm gonna rename this back to what I was calling it, spawn options, I think it was. Can delete that one. And just to wrap this up, I'll go back over all this again if anyone is a little bit behind, but then the last thing I need to do, uh-oh, don't crash. Oh, totally, oh, it crashed. Oh, of course it did. Well, it gives you guys another second to catch up there. So yeah, get your spawn points, make as many as you want, set up the probabilities however you like. Hey, you know what, while it's loading, I'll show what's going on over here. You guys will see a little bit of the much more full version of this. But over here where we are spawning the next platform, here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be getting the length of our array, in other words, the size of it. And then because arrays start at 0 instead of 1, we're going to need to subtract 1 from the total size. And then we'll get a random slot from that array. And then that's the one that will be used for where to place the next platform. So we have our array, we have all of our different options. We're going to be picking one randomly, and then that will be what's used. Random, integer, and range. So each slot that we're putting things into in the array has its own index. So it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. And so we're saying, okay, what's the length of that? Now we could just say, get a random integer in the range from 0 to 7. We could say, well, I know that that's the size of it, but then what if you want to add some more spawn transform points later? This way, it's always based on the actual size of the array, and then you don't have to worry about fixing this kind of stuff later on. Okay, now we're back here. I don't know when the last time was I saved, so it might be a good opportunity to just go through all that again very quick. Oh, and by the way, the reason I keep coming back to this menu is because this is set up as my default level right now. So if I go edit, project settings, maps and modes, the game default map, I could change this over to plat piece testing ground. Or sorry, game default is when you do a build. Editor startup map is the first one you're going to see when this starts up. You only worry about that when you're actually creating the game or doing a standalone instance of it. So anyway, now if I crash again, it'll go back to the map that we're actually working on. So I'm gonna go File, Recent Levels, Testing Ground. Okay, so let's see where we are. Over in, oh, look at that. I got to recreate all my spawn points. Okay, we'll do this quick. Might give you guys a chance to even get ahead of me if you understood everything we were just talking about. So we're doing left. We're doing right. Control W again to just duplicate directly there, and then jump. And jump I'm going to put over here. 600. Right was going to be down about there. 90 and 0 and 50 and 250. Left over here, -90 rotation, 250. What was that, 50? Nope, sorry, -50 and 0. Thank you. Someone's got a good memory. And then jump is over there, so there's all those. Then over in the construction script, I am just dragging all these in, blop, like that. And then I am going to make an array and then add a bunch of pins, making spawn left, spawn right, and spawn jump all pretty easy or pretty common. And then, or sorry, making all those less common than spawn center, which will be the most common probability. And then, so I'm not trying to figure out exactly what kind of array this is, although hovering over it, it does tell you it's an array of scene component object references. So the reason the array I was trying to do before didn't work was that was an array of actors, and actors are slightly different from scene components. So if I was going to create the array from scratch, I would go for a scene component But the easy thing to do is just right click and say promote to variable, and it's going to pop up right down here as an array. And I'm going to call it spawn options. And before anything too crazy happens, I'm going to choose save on compile always, because I do compile a lot, but I don't always think about saving. And then make sure that construction script is going to set up these spawn options. So that's all set up. Oh, look, and yeah, if you do compile, you can even see, like right now in this moment, it's actually making the array. So it's a good reminder that it's not happening at runtime with the game, it's happening right now. So those are all being set up. And then over in the event graph, now we're going to delete this, or you can leave get world transform, because that is what we're going to need to do. And now we just need to randomly choose one of those. So we are going to get our spawn options, drag that in. We're getting it this time. We're not adding anything to it. We're just saying, hey, what are those? And then we want to get the length of it, but it's going to be -1 because of that weird aspect of how arrays work. So you can just type in minus or subtract, and you want to make sure you're getting integer minus integer. There's a lot of different math, and you have to make sure you're using the right kind. Integer, for those who don't know, is a number that does not have any decimal places. And the array, it's just 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. So there's no decimal places. And then we're going to get a random number. So from here, random int in range. Oh, actually, you know what? You don't even have to do in range. You can do in range, but it's just really because we're starting at 0. You can just say random integer, because 0 is going to be the lowest one by default. And then all we're setting is the maximum one. So it's going to be 0 up to this one. And then that value that we get, that's going to be the one that we're going to want to use. So the other thing we want from spawn, not just the length, we also want to get a copy of it. So if you type in get for spawn options, we're going to see get a copy. I'll review this all. I know I'm doing this a little bit fast. I'll go through all this again. I just want to get the whole graph laid out. And then which one? It says, what part of the array do you want? By default, it's going to do 0, which is the first one. Nope, we want to do whichever one this random integer is. So I connect all that. Let me just hit play really quick to confirm that this is doing what I think it is. And then we'll go look at it again to confirm it's working. Okay, so over here, I'm going to press P. There we go. And here we go. Just press P a bunch, and it is generating a very silly snake-like map forever and ever. Okay, for anyone who missed a step there. So let's review. Over in the construction script, we have all of our spawn points. They are making an array together, and that's literally make array. From that array, we created a variable by right-clicking on array and then calling it spawn options. When you do it that way, you don't even need to do the thing I was saying earlier where you have to change these items. It's going to give you exactly the kind of variable you need. Then that also created the set value for whatever we wanted to call it, in this case, spawn options. And you want to make sure you're setting it, not getting it, because getting is just reading it, setting it is writing it. Kind of like upload versus download also. And that's it for construction script. So then knowing that this exists, you'll know it's working if you hit compile and you see that flow happening. Happens before anything in the game happens. And then event graph over here is where we're picking which of these to use. So all of these spawn points are inside the spawn options array. So we didn't set the spawn options array now, we got it. And then here it was, we got it. We got its length. And then to decide which one we got from it, we said, okay, how big is it? Okay, whatever size we just got, we have to subtract 1 from that because 0 is 1. If it's an array with 10 objects, then it goes 0 to 9. That's, again, the right way to think of it. And then we want to get a random integer between 0 and that total length. So if we have 10 objects in our array, we want to get one of those 10, which again goes up to 9, including 0. not to overindulge the confusingness that starting with 0 can have. So we're getting whichever random integer came from there. And then that is going to be the target, where we then say, okay, what's the transform value of that? That's what we want to use for spawning the blueprint. And transform, again, is location, rotation, and scale. And yeah, if you messed it all with the scale of what these are, you would also be changing how crazy size the platform is. What is the node before random integer? It's integer minus integer. Integer minus integer. If you also just type in, I don't know if subtract works. Yeah, you can type in subtract or just the minus key. And again, you'll see a lot of options. So you have to make sure it is integer minus integer. Great. All right. And then if you think you've got it, you should be able to just hit play and then start pressing your P key or whatever you set up there. And it should start to create a pretty fun random level. That's right. Can I get a show of hands or something in the chat that tells me if you guys have this working correctly? You got a cool little procedurally generated level. Hooray, Trent. Yay, Matt. Cool. And yeah, and you can try to play it too. You can hit play, and you know it'll all allow you to run on it. Whoops. P. And you can test your skills and see. You know, you could also cheat. Oh, there we go. Yeah, that jump is crazy. Yeah, I was gonna say, if anyone wants to change the jump, by the way, if you open up the third-person character controller, if you hit edit on it, sorry, I did that quickly. If you click on third-person character controller and do edit, or you find it in your content browser, third person, and the blue underline is what tells you it's a blueprint. If you open that up, and then you go to third-person character, oh, not third-person character. Oh, there it is. Jump max, something like 600. Maybe it's under capsule component. I was just looking at this last night because I just changed it. Oh, character movement. Here it is. It's down here. So if you click on character movement, inherited, then you see stuff about, you know, what speeds you want everything to be, what mass you want to be, how heavy. And here, the jump velocity is 600, which is a lot. I found 300 felt a little bit wimpy. Something that felt a little better to me was 400, if anyone wants to change that. And yeah, you can fiddle with all these if you want to mess with how the character actually moves. But you know, the next thing we're going to be doing, probably the last thing because it is getting kind of late, is adding the trigger boxes. And what's fun about trigger boxes is they will work with anything that you want passing through them. So if instead of using a third-person character controller, we wanted to use just a rolly ball or a VR pawn or something like that, that all just works, which is pretty cool.
Quick question.
Yeah.
You have to press P and you have to hold down the right click and W to move forward, right? So you've got a lot of things going on. Can you make it spawn these automatically, randomly on a time basis? So you have to follow the path?
Yeah, you could do that. You could do like a countdown. Yeah, there's a timer function in here. You could also use delay. There's a few different ways you could do that.
I did it with a trigger box. Every time I enter the platform, I spawn the other one.
Yeah, so that's what I'm about to show is the platform method. So we're gonna build a trigger box on top of the platform. So every time you enter a platform, the next platform will spawn.
Got it.
Cool. Are we ready to keep going? I think we'll call that a night because we've been here for a while. And you know what, because I still do have a lot more to this, maybe I'll also just schedule a follow-up, and anyone who wants to keep going would be more than welcome to. But yeah, this is fun and also time-consuming. Okay, so let's wrap it up with a nice trigger box.
Awesome.
Trigger boxes are great. I love trigger boxes. And just so you know, by the way, there is a box trigger and a sphere trigger right here under your basic options. If you wanted to do something in the level blueprint and you just wanted to say like, hey, you know, grab these triggers. Don't follow me here. I'm just doing this really quick as an example. You could say, I have all these triggers and I've placed them strategically throughout the level, and I want them all to make something happen when you're using them. Then you could do that. In fact, actually, when I'm clicking on these, sorry, expand this for a second. Say on actor begin overlap. Ooh, that's actually more complicated than we want right now. Anyways, don't worry about that. My point being that you could just have a bunch of these placed throughout a level and then, you know, do stuff in the level blueprint, but we're gonna have our triggers set up specifically as part of our platform. So the idea, again, just to clarify what was just said, we're gonna say every time you enter a platform, it's gonna spawn the next platform. So that way you'll have just a little bit of a sense to react to whether it's turning left or right. And thank you, Stefano, that's very kind. I'm glad this has been helpful. So let's go into our platform piece. And now back over in viewport, we are gonna want to add a box collision. It doesn't say trigger. Collision can be literally a collision, like you smack into it, or it can be something that is acting as a trigger. Also like Unity, you know, you can have a collision component in a Unity object that can act either for smacking into something, or it can ignore the collision but read triggers. So if you do that, add component box collision. Let's call this trig next plat for trigger next platform. I'll just spell platform. And then we'll drag that into their scene here. Whoops. Oh, it's already there. We're not dragging it, it already exists. And then this is up to you. This is just, you know, how sensitive do you want to be to this? Like if someone jumps over this, do you want them to have to go back and touch it? If not, then you probably want this to be kind of tall. You literally have to think about, you know, your character passing through this. And it's not like the foot or the hand of the character. Your character has a big old capsule around it that's going to trigger it. So this big pill that's around the character, that's actually what will be triggering it. And you can change the size of that, but it's kind of a wide berth. I'll show the construction script again real quick, just for anyone who needs one last look at that. Take a screenshot if you like. Construction script, set all our spawn options.
Alex, if you want a fun way so that players can't defeat your volume, make it a little bit taller than your platform, but bring the edges of it just inside your platform, because they have to land on the platform, and then it'll be a landing volume instead of like passing through a volume.
I'm not quite sure I understood that. So like make it tall, but then what's the other thing to do to it?
No, only make it just taller than your platform. So make it like a slightly thicker board, but a slightly smaller board, right?
I see what you mean. That's very clever.
And then
so,
it becomes
a
landing trigger and not a pass-through trigger.
I gotcha. Okay, I like that idea. So what we can do actually, so we can go over here to platform. We can copy the scale values we have here and paste those. So the way you do that, because I just did it quick, was platform, right-clicking there, copy. And then we're going to do the same thing with location. Copy, location, and then paste. So right now it's exactly the right size, but we want it to be a little bit bigger because you are going to have to land on it somewhere. So what we can do is just make it a little wider, a little taller, just for, oh, sorry, I'm changing the transform, or I'm changing the position, not the size. So we could do, you know, a little bit longer, a little bit taller. Oops. Oh, that's interesting. This is, oh, I assumed that this was going to be the same size as the platform. It's actually not. So I guess we just need to eyeball this, which is fine. You know, it's invisible. It's not going to affect anything the player sees. Yeah, so you just want to make sure that the player is definitely going to land in it. Something like that. Okay, that's cool. Maybe I'll make it a little taller just to make sure. Who knows when you're gonna have a weird glitch. That should do it. Okay. And there, yeah, you can normalize these if you want. No real need to. So we have that. What are we gonna do with it? So let's go over to our event graph. And now, in addition to P being a way to make this happen, we're gonna have another option for it. And you know what? Let's create a custom event, because maybe we're gonna have a bunch of different ways to make this happen. So we can say custom, add custom event, and we're gonna call it spawn next platform. And so by doing a custom event in here, kind of like how we did a custom event with input, we can call this from other places. So the reason I'm doing this is because I want to keep all this logic together, but then the trigger volume is going to be kind of its own thing. And I don't want to get too confused with everything happening there. So here, we're going to say, if anything calls spawn next platform, just like P, that'll be a way to make it happen. And the platform method is going to be right here. Drag that in. And you'll notice now that I have that in here, there is an option for on component begin overlap. That's over in events. So see that little arrow that tells you that it can be one of these red things? All the red things have those arrows. These are all different events that just come with having a box. Okay? And so what we want is begin overlap. Begin overlap and end overlap will be the only things we really care about. And actually, yeah, we're not going to get to end overlap today, just begin overlap. And so this has a bunch of stuff going on, so we want to make sure that we see it. And then actually, believe it or not, we don't actually need this anymore. We just pulled that out so we could see that event that could be grabbed. And so now there's a bunch of stuff going on here, but the only one we're really going to care about is other actor. We want to make sure that the other platforms touching each other don't trigger each other. And that could also be solved by just pulling this in a little bit. We could just do that kind of thing, and then they probably wouldn't touch each other. But just to be safe, I mean, this is a good rule of thumb to make sure that you're only having triggers happen when other actors are happening. So what we're going to want to do is make sure that the other actor is the, oops, sorry, it's going to want to be the player pawn, I think. It's either the player pawn or the player controller. So we're going to say, does the other actor equal? So if you type in equals twice, it's going to say, does it equal an object? And there's a lot of different equals. Anytime you want to see if a number is equal to another number or a class is equal to another class. Here I'm just saying, is the other actor equal to the player pawn? Oh, it is? Okay. Well, in that case, we're going to want to spawn next platform. So I'm just pulling this logic out a little bit over here. Now's a good time as any to create a comment box. So if you highlight everything that's going to be in a comment box, you can hit C and then type whatever comment you want. So we're going to say, if player lands on platform, spawn next platform. And then you can give this a little bit more space. So now what we're going to be doing is an if-then, which in Unity, you might call it an if-then in C#. In Unreal, we call it a branch. But you know, they know what's going on. So if you type if, it'll give you a branch. And so this is going to say, if something is true, then true. Sorry, if something is true, then there's one thing that can happen. If something is false, then another thing happens. We're not going to care if it's false. All we're going to care about is that if this is the player pawn, then we want to spawn the next platform. And so, you know, all I'm doing by dragging this out over here is just keeping this logic a little bit less muddled with everything going on over here. And now this feels really naked over here too, so we should put a comment box around it. But watch this, to make this go over to here, we can say, oh, if that's true, then what we want to do is spawn next platform. And so now that little blue node is calling the red node right over there. All right. Any questions on that? How did you make a box? The box is add component and then box collision. Yes, and the node before the branch is equal equal. So if you literally type in the equal symbol twice, it's saying, you know, is this actor that is touching the trigger volume right now, is it the other actor you have it attached to. Oh, Spawn Next Platform was just a custom event that I added to here. So the way I did that was I right-clicked and typed custom event. And then there's an option to add a custom event. Yeah, comment is highlight everything and hit the C key. But that's how you create a custom event. So I just called mine Spawn Next Platform. So it's basically an easy way to keep things at, you know, different parts of your blueprint and then still have them talk to each other. So things don't get too jumbled and muddled in one spot. Like, you know, a rule of thumb in terms of organization, I like to have my events sticking out so it's much easier to see, hey, there is an event happening here. So I might bring event play over here. So right now, you know, I could put a comment around this and say, make sure the player can press or can use inputs at the beginning. And by the way, if you want to get even more granular with your comment box areas, you can change your comment colors to anything you like. Here's some of the colors I already saved. Right there, comment color. And then over here, let's see, let's tighten this up a little bit. But yeah, this is, you know, Spawn Next Platform. And then I could add in more detail if, you know, I say Spawn Next Platform at a random spawn location, or spawn transform, really. Cool. All right. Yeah, we're just about done here, guys. Should be just a couple more minutes. Just want everyone to get to this point. And this should pretty much work. So again here, we're saying, oh, if something touches the trigger, first, is it the player? Oh, it is? Oh, yeah, it is the player. Okay, great. Then spawn the next platform. Zoom in on if player, please. Yeah. Hold that for a second. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, David. Yeah, and anyone who's gotten to this point, you know, in theory, you should be able to hit compile and then press play. And just by running on the platforms, it should work. Spawn option details. Here we go. Yeah, so I've got do once. You don't need the do once if you have consume on input unchecked. Sorry, if you have it checked, then you don't need do once. I unchecked it because maybe I want to use P a different time. So the do once makes sure that each platform only spawns one platform. Cool. Thanks, Joshua. All right. And just because now I'm wondering, like, for everyone who's leaving, you know, is this actually working? Let me just minimize really quick and hit play and just make sure that this does what I think it should do. Oh, yep, it did. Great jump. There we go. See? So each time you land on a platform, triggers the next one. And then you can see how fast you can go without messing up. Oh, loop back around. Now we're starting to spawn on top. Creates another train over here. Oh, go left, go left, go left. Yeah, look. All right, we created a loop back to where we were. That's fun. Okay, so that's definitely a good stopping point for today. I'll pull up the that graph again. Anyone who wants to see anything. And yeah, I'd say great stopping point. I'm happy to keep going to get more to the point of what you guys saw with my silly Twitter video, maybe next week. But anyone has any other final questions, feel free to ask them now. What is the variable type of spawn options? It is a scene component object reference. But the nice thing is, if you remember the comment Steve made, you actually don't even need to think about that. If you do make array or create any kind of new variable and you right click and say promote to variable, whatever it is, it will make it into a new variable, which is super useful. So, you know, I could have, I just want to give another random example of that. Like, yeah, like even this, even the random integer we're getting, a lot of these pins, even that, I could make that into a variable. I wouldn't even need to know that it's an integer. If I did that, it would automatically create this as a variable, and you'll see that it's, you know, automatically detaching that and setting it up as a new variable. So let me undo that. But promote to variable is a really useful tool. And you know what, guys, I'll show you one other thing real quickly here. So I mentioned that if you Control C everything inside your graph, it's actually a bunch of text. And so a great little website resource that exists is called blueprintue.com. So watch this. If I go here and I say Alex's Intro to Blueprints, Part 1, whatever, and then I literally just hit Control V, all this text will turn into a rendered blueprint that shows everything that I just made. And now, for anyone who still is missing anything, I can now share this with you. I can give you guys, I mean, you could look at that link right now, but this now just exists, and I can just give you that link. I'll paste it in the Zoom, and you could literally now just go into, where's the chat? You could literally just go into your event graph now and then just paste it. Chat is hard to find. Ta-da! Yeah, so notice it says, if you want to copy this, you'll go in here and do Control A to select everything, and then you can just go paste it. Oh, where'd it go? Oops, I went full screen with it. Reset, there it is. Yeah. Yeah, so that looks, you can actually zoom into it just by clicking that link. This is like a nice little blueprint window. Oh, can you guys not see the link? I thought I just pasted it in the chat. I didn't realize I've only been, that's weird. I've only been sending to everyone in the waiting room. That's weird. I actually don't see an option to change that.
It says everyone.
Everyone. Yeah, no, mine says everyone in waiting room. Maybe it's like a different chat. It's very bizarre. Well, you know what? Let me send it to, I don't know, Henry. And Henry, you try pasting it to everyone. That's strange. I've never seen that in Zoom before. Oh, there we go. Scott got it. How did Scott get it? Oh, he probably typed in what he saw up there. Oh, Henry, you just sent it back to me. Make sure you change it to everyone. Yeah. Now, something important to note is if you are pasting anything into a blueprint and it doesn't have the variables, you have to create them. So actually, here's a good last thing to show. Real quick, just to show how this could work. Let's pretend I have an empty blueprint. Blah, 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 blah. That's a dumb way of me making sure I delete that later. But only if I can find it. So I just copied my blueprint. And if I go into this empty event graph and I paste it, it's like, oh, look, everything came in. Nope, it didn't. Because it's missing a few things. Like it doesn't know about spawn next platform because it wasn't actually created yet. So if I do compile here, I'm gonna get a whole bunch of errors. And so some of those are fairly easy to fix. Like for example, it's like, oh, spawn options doesn't exist. Guess what? If you get an error there, you can right click on it and say create variable spawn options. And now it is, there it is. It still says error because I need to recompile, but now I do that. And now the only error is that it doesn't know about spawn next platform here. I guess because I still, do I need to create that? Yeah, I don't, oh no, spawn next platform is still there. Maybe we just have to add it in manually again. Spawn next, there it is. Okay,
Yeah,
now it worked, yeah.
I think the issue with that one, not remembering it, is that those kinds of calls to other events in Unreal become references. And I have a feeling that it's that one that you had pasted in earlier is referencing the other blueprint.
Gotcha,
It's
yeah,
not
like
referencing
the
this
actual
one.
code of it, that's what
Yeah.
it's doing.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Great. Glad you got yours working, Elizabeth. Andrew, do you want to share your screen? Maybe we can figure out your infinite loop error. Great. And in case anyone, runs into a similar issue, how did you fix it, Andrew?
Sorry, I just didn't have the equal condition set to the condition. I hadn't connected it to the branch, so it was just going an infinite loop there back and forth, and it wasn't ever leaving.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for today, guys. Just to give you a little preview of what you might get to check out next week, I'll just do a quick flyby of some of the other code I have going on in the sample one I made. So here's that little trigger box that we set up, spawn next platform. And then over at spawn next platform, I actually have a few other things going on in this one because there's spawn next platform. Because we have our spawn options, but then I'm also setting a limit on the number of platforms you can have, because then once we reach our max platform limit, we're then going to spawn like a little prize at the end. So it's checking to see, oh, have we hit the limit? If not, then keep spawning. If we have, then go to the event final platform, and then final platform makes a nice sound. It destroys the trigger box because we don't want to accidentally spawn the next one. Destroying can be dangerous because then if anything else tries to reference something that's been destroyed, you get exceptions and errors, and that's no fun. But this seems to have been a safe one so far. Then we spawn the prize. And then I also have lights on all my other platforms that only turn on for the next platform, just kind of a nice effect. But then at the end, I want to have all the lights turn on for the entire platform and do like a stroby dancey thing, which is kind of fun. And there's a very simple way to do that that is not computationally efficient, which is just using event tick, which is like void update in Unity, and just having it toggle really quickly there. But you can also put it in a delay node. We didn't go over delay nodes at all today. That's a really good one for next time. And then printing is useful too. I didn't actually go over printing at all. Anytime you want to make sure something is firing correctly, it's always good to have a print at the end that will tell you if something worked. So very quickly, just to show that. I guess there's a part of me that's like, we should wrap up at exactly 6. So I should keep showing things for 5 more minutes. I'm still in the same project. Platformer. Yeah, so something, let me delete this monstrosity. Delete will obliterate all references. Great use of the word obliterate. Yeah, so the way we might use print might be here. We could say print, and by default it says hello, but we could say piece has spawned, use whatever plain text you find to be useful. And over here, you can say player should have input. And what's important about these print strings is if something gets interrupted while you are going through your flow, then the rest of the things don't happen. So if you do event begin play and it can't find the player controller, then this won't print. It won't actually get to that spot. So printing sometimes can be a really useful way to say, hey, have we gotten this far? And it doesn't have to be at the end. You could do it in the middle of longer events. Yeah. Maybe after this, you could say, trigger should spawn next platform. Whatever. So then just to show what that looks like, now when I press play, you'll see there, player should have input in the upper left. And then, yep, player should, oh, and we're also getting player should have input each time because each platform is enabling input on the player. So yeah, nice little text log. And everything that pops up there is also in the output log. If you don't see the output log, it is in Window, Developer Tools, Output Log. So all those messages we just saw, they stay here. And if your output log is ever getting too crowded and you're having trouble finding what you want, like say I've had 1 billion of these debug logs and I'm trying to find, trigger should, I'm only trying to find how many times this message went through. And it's like, oh, that's from the last time we played. You can always right click in the output log and do clear log, and then it'll all start from scratch. And you can watch here as this stuff all happens. Ah, and I'm falling. There we go. Cool. All right. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, everyone's free to go. Thank you. Thank you. I'll send a follow-up email. But anyone who still needs help, 11 p.m. in Scotland. Wow, Leslie, thanks for hanging out. I'm glad this was useful. The length node is giving me an error from spawn options. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, I'll stick around for 5 more minutes for anyone who's still having some issues. But everyone who's happy with where they've gotten, congratulations. Well done. Feel free to keep playing with this. Next class would be fun to see, you know, any little additions anyone's added, more spawn points, more features of the pieces, all that stuff. Cool, cool, cool. I lost the message from who was having trouble, but if anyone wants to share their screen right now and just show any issues they're having, I'm happy to help troubleshoot for a second.
I'm gonna run, you guys. I have to get going. Alex, thanks for having me. Hope everybody has tons of success. I'll probably see you in the next one.
Thank you, Steve. Happy birthday.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Happy birthday.
All right, so the problem here is that the construction, so nothing is actually happening when construction script activates. So try dragging your pin from construction script over to set spawn options. And then there, you're setting spawn options when you should be getting spawn options in the event graph. Yeah, that should be a get. So drag spawn options directly to the same spot that was. There you go. So that's there. And then also drag spawn options over to the get node. Or drag a pin from it. Okay, try hitting compile. There you go. Let's see if it works. Try hitting play. And then, sorry, I meant try hitting play over in the main window. See if it runs correctly. Oh, and by the way, if anyone has that blinking graduation cap in the upper right, you can always right click that and turn that off. FYI. Yeah, so try going back to your main window and pressing play, because if you're hitting play inside the blueprint, you're only going to see inside the blueprint. Yeah, so try walking on the platform. So it's spawning a bunch of pieces. I can see that it is spawning, but it looks like they're all on top of each other. Open up your plate piece and let's see where the spawn points are. Yeah, just get the blueprint open again. You can access it from World Outliner. There you go. Great. So yeah, let's look at your spawn points. So click spawn C. Okay, that's good. Spawn L. Good. Spawn right. Spawn jump. Okay, those are all in good spots. Go to your construction script again. Oh, that still needs to be attached. Construction script has to go to set. There you go. Now give it a try. I think it'll work. Haha. Well, and you can move the camera with your mouse. I think that was working. Cool. All right, great. Anyone else? Anyone else have any last minute questions here?
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey Alex, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Are we gonna solve the issue of overlapping platforms?
Remind me what that issue is?
As in platforms spawning over each other.
Oh, I thought we solved that. Share your screen. Let's take a look.
All right.
Nice wood choice.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Let's see
so far, so good. Whoa. Are we having overlap problems there?
It should have happened. It happened before.
Things always get fixed when you need to ask for help.
Exactly.
Yeah. Whoa.
Oh.
You did pretty well there. Yeah, it looks like it's spawning one at a time. I'm looking at your actor count as you go.
It really doesn't want to overlap at the moment. Oh, there we go. There we go.
Oh, you mean if they overlap on top of each other?
Yep.
Oh, like that. I mean, there's some, you can add a branch. You can have an if statement that like checks to see if the spawn point is overlapping with another actor, and then you could have something that says like if it's overlapping, then offset the spawn point by 100 or whatever 500 centimeters. So yeah, you could do that as a branch. As a beginner thing, I'm not too worried about that. I can show you really quickly just what a super quick way to fiddle with that would be if you'd like.
Sure.
Great.
If you
Okay,
want.
so back to sharing screen. All right, so if we've got our platform piece with our nice prints, and we're spawning the next platform. So before it spawns it, right around, yeah, because it's going to spawn it, so it can be after the do once. We'd have a branch. Oh, actually, no, it would be, let's see. Yeah, because I'm thinking, like, by the time you're spawning, you're already picking the transform, so it almost needs to happen afterwards. So, what you could do is you could say, so here this return value is that actor. So you could say that, you could check then after it's already been spawned to see if it's overlapping and then offset it. So I think what we would do there is overlap is overlapping actor. Get overlapping actors. Here we go. Get overlapping actors. Maybe that target is actor. So yeah, so we're saying, okay, what's overlapping this? And then we say if a platform or whatever our thing is, BP plat piece, we say if this is what's overlapping, or this would be our if. So this would be our if branch. If branch, if our overlapping actor is that target plus filter. So really, because what this is doing is saying get all the actors that are overlapping, then filter them to just be platform pieces. So really, we just want to see if this is more than 0. If there's anything in here, we know it's overlapping. So overlapping actors, get a copy or get length. I guess we need a copy of it. Get a copy, and then you might have to. I don't know if we can get that length when it just exists kind of in space. No, there it is, length. So then we say if the length, if that's greater than 0, if int greater than integer. Yeah, if this is anything other than 0, then we're overlapping something. So again, we're saying, okay, we just spawned a new platform. Okay, get all the actors that's overlapping with. ignore like the player or things like that. And then if it's overlapping other pieces like itself, so this array is more than 0 and that's true, then we need to move it. So then we'd say we need to offset the actor. So let's see, add actor local offset. I get confused sometimes with when I want to use local and when I want to use world here. Yeah, because we want to offset it just on its own terms. So for example, let's try, I'll try something really extreme just so we can see that it's really obviously different. And actually, another thing we could do to test this, that's kind of a debug, is we can change the height too. If we make the height change, then that would be a way to know if this is working. So target, we don't want target self because that's the actor that we're in right now. We want this one. Okay, and in theory, this should work. So we're saying, yeah, if this finds that it's overlapping an actor, then offset it that much. Let's see if it works. And then also, let's print it too then. So false would be nothing for now. We'll say, I guess, false would be that piece is spawned. And then this one would be piece has moved. Okay, and then also, rather than just wait for this to happen randomly, let's just duplicate this and put it out there. So we're likely going to touch it. Ah, there we go. Look at that. It offset it, which means that it detected that it was touching another actor. It also creates kind of an interesting new game.
I see. That's awesome.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so that's where I'll leave you for tonight. That's fun though. Let me pull up that blueprint one more time so you guys can see what that looks like. It's a nice little addition. I'll keep that in there and show it briefly at the start of next class. You know what? I'll even paste it up on the GitHub thing again. There you go. So you can type that in manually, or I just shared a little paste bin of how that works. Okay, guys, thanks for sticking around. I'll try to make this recording available to everyone, but also since this was a very long session, I will probably, I'll share this so everyone does have access to this, but I'll probably also do more of like a webinar format version of this where I just talk through the whole thing, and then that might be easier for people to review on their own time. But thanks everyone for sticking around. I'm glad this was useful. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this, so I apologize for spots where I went too fast, but I hope this was useful. Thanks everyone. I'm going to end the chat, and yeah, I'll send an email to everyone who was here. Have a good night. Cheers. Oh, I never made a heart symbol in the chat before. That's cool. I have to figure out how to do that. Bye, guys.